Two explosive blasts sounded, almost simultaneously. The moment their spinning bodies hit the ground, two pits appeared once more on the surface. Their bodies differed in size, but the pits they created were nearly identical, even perfectly round. Because of the web-like cracks inside, viewed from above, they resembled lace bras. The instant they landed, both paused momentarily. That was the result of their chi blood not rising immediately. The next moment, both moved simultaneously again. But the great heavenly dog was visibly faster. She didn't upright her body. Instead, she performed a lateral slice with her fallen body and clamped fiercely. The next instant, Duan Yun felt as though two fleshy legs pressed upon him like mountain peaks. His shoulder was pinned down, and the woman's fleshy legs were about to crush his head as they came together. This woman was not only adept in fist technique but also excelled in grappling techniques. Yet, just as her legs were about to crush down, they suddenly stopped. It was because, at almost the same time, Duan Yun's hands also clamped onto her two fleshy legs. Telepathy clasp. In that instant, the previously vigorously moving two suddenly went still. The surrounding dust was still swirling, and over there Ziyu was still fighting those cripples. Ziyu quickly noticed their knees couldn't bend, but their rolling skills were top-notch. Every time she thrust her sword, sure of hitting the opponent, they would roll and unexpectedly evade her lethal strike. Their rolling was truly bizarre, seemingly mundane but always evading her fatal sword strike. As Ziyu continued to kill, she glanced in Duan Yun's direction. In that moment, she was left dumbfounded. Because at that time, Duan Yun's head was buried between the great heavenly dog's legs. As a professional writer of emotional action dramas, she couldn't help but let her mind wander under such circumstances. What were they doing? If someone didn't know better, they might have thought you were doing that. In that instant, Ziyu's eyes turned green, and her sword light suddenly intensified. It wasn't just the power of bitterness making her sword heart clearer, but also the realization that this seemingly improper position was extremely dangerous for Duan Yun. Then, a passionate Yame voice rang out. The two who had been still suddenly moved. Naturally, Duan Yun was the first to move. The telepathy clasp is a technique that can halt both chi flows simultaneously, meaning he had locked the great heavenly dog, but it also meant she had locked him. But since this telepathy clasp was his ultimate skill, even though it was a lock, the key was with him. He could unlock it any time, catching his opponent off guard. So, in the instant of unlocking, his entire body suddenly halted, and breaking body sword energy surged upward towards his opponent's crotch. With a boom, the breaking body sword energy transformed into a body-breaking sword pillar, crashing into the great heavenly dog and forcing her back. This was why the great heavenly dog suddenly let out a scream. Because by this point, Duan Yun no longer intended to defeat his opponent with fists and kicks. He had to admit that, in terms of pure physical strength and martial arts, he was indeed no match for this flesh tank. However, young hero Duan's skills in martial arts were not his strongest. What he excelled in was the dual masters of sword and saber. Suddenly releasing sword chi was no big deal. Young hero Duan never wasted his strength. He would rather skip training and sleep for a month if it meant he could decisively eliminate an evil demon. Duan Yun's breaking body sword chi was incredibly fast and thick, pitch black, and carried an ominous death energy. Yet the great heavenly dog, suddenly facing such an attack, gripped with her legs and remarkably withstood it. Sparks erupted from her crotch, clamping down on the body-breaking sword pillar, halting its progress. Duan Yun was shocked at the sight. In the martial world, there's an iron crotch skill, a form of hard qigong, relatively common, but no one has truly trained their crotch to the consistency of iron. It's even legendary that in the highest realm of the iron crotch skill, even one's testicles can become as hard as iron. Urinating occasionally sprays not urine, but molten iron. And at this moment, the great heavenly dog's crotch could arguably be tougher than iron. The sparks and lightning yet still stable was proof of that. Gritting his teeth, Duan Yun unsheathed his famous sword. The blade, ghostly blue, sliced out with an eerie blue sword light. The sword light was like a crescent moon, carrying the unique spinning force of the seven-layered spring rain. As the seven-layered spring rain flew out, Duan Yun's demon sword gentle unsheathed as well, cutting out another seven-layered spring rain. There was a time when one seven-layered spring rain from Duan Yun would leave him breathless. When he first practiced, he would nearly collapse after using it once. But now, the seven-layered spring rain was just his starting level or perhaps slightly above basic attacks. Even though the two seven-layered spring rains were delivered one after another, they formed a pincering maneuver, like a pair of scissors, entrapping the great heavenly dog. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled sounds erupted as the body of the great heavenly dog, seemingly trained into an impregnable fortress, bounced chaotically within the intersecting sword chi, with an astonishing momentum. Once the dual blades were unsheathed, Duan Yun returned to his comfort zone, his aura sharply rising. Initially advantageous, it turned back into the great heavenly dog being beaten, and that wretched woman suddenly felt utterly drained. She was about to die, but why must the process be so turbulent, regardless if her heart could bear it or not? If not for her unwavering loyalty, if not for wanting to see the great heavenly dog ultimately victorious before her eyes, that woman would have likely died suddenly long ago. She essentially clung to life through sheer force of will. There was once a martial artist who contracted a terminal illness, the doctor informing him he couldn't even survive the day. He couldn't help but ask if sustaining his life with indomitable willpower could grant him an extra half-month, because he wanted to wait for his son's return. The doctor simply thought he was deluded, said nothing more, and left. That night, the martial artist's illness completely erupted, coming to claim his life. The family quickly noticed his body was cold, his gaze scattered, appearing dead but unyielding. Yet whenever the family tried to close his eyes, he would grab their hands suddenly and say, "I'm still holding on." Afterward came a series of miracles. That martial artist indeed held on for half a month, persisted until his son returned, and only after settling affairs did he die. During that time, according to his family, he died at least 100 times. Twice. He was about to be put in a coffin but suddenly grasped the coffin board and came back to life. This martial artist later became known as the Undying Warrior. Although he did eventually die, he inspired the people of the martial world that as long as one had supreme willpower, seemingly impossible miracles could be accomplished. Now this wretched woman was in a similar situation. She ought to have died while climbing this snow mountain, but she endured with sheer will, likely should have died suddenly several times, but she's still watching with eyes wide open. 8-layered spring rain. Rotate. 9-layered. 10-layered. Little you is coming out. Love Unlimited is ready. Previously, the great heavenly dog took every chance to press the advantage and aim to kill him. Now, Duan Yun wasn't going to give the opponent any opportunity either. He wielded his dual blades like Princess Iron Fan waving the palm leaf fan to fan Sun Wukong to death, continuously unleashing one more ferocious wave of sword chi after another. Or, rather, Duan Yun's dual blades truly resembled the palm leaf fan now, forming an unstoppable blade windstorm constantly slashing the great heavenly dog trapped in the middle. If each rotation of sword chi counts as one strike, the great heavenly dog might have suffered hundreds of strikes within this short time. But her body was incredibly resilient, previously crushed by the fire lotus, and currently the sword chi still couldn't tear her completely apart. But it was only temporary. With a ripping sound, a crack appeared on the great heavenly dog's body, as solid as a fortress. Then came a second crack, a third. These cracks were all small but quickly accumulated, as if about to connect together. It's like once a porcelain piece has been dropped, even if the surface damage isn't severe, it's already internally wounded. And by this time, Duan Yun and Little Yu had united their intent. Love Unlimited. Love Unlimited. When Duan Yun and Dharma Image Xiaoyu unified once more, spinning upward like starting a mecha, other sounds suddenly echoed in the arena. One must know the sound of the blade wind created by Duan Yun was already tremendous, no less than a real tornado, yet it still couldn't suppress that voice. Sporadically, Duan Yun heard the other party seem to be saying, "A bag of rice yo. How many floors to carry? Divine soil, heavenly attack. Pookie pookie pookie." An ear-piercing sound of earth breaking erupted, as if something was continuously emerging from it. The next moment, Ziyu's eyes saw a sea of white. Sharp white. If Duan Yun and Dharma image Xiao Yu's love unlimited was a ghostly blue blade hurricane, then what emerged from the ground was a chaotic white tapestry. With a booming crash, the ghostly blue hurricane clashed with the chaotic white tapestry. The ground rolled like waves, and Ziyu and those few individuals resembling legless cripples were suddenly flung high into the air. This leap was continuous. If Duan Yun were to describe it, it would be akin to jumping onto a super bouncy cloud, unable to stop at all. The aftermath of these two forces was already so extensive. Then what about the core of this power? Duan Yun couldn't see it, nor did he care to. He simply accelerated with Xiaoyu. As long as he completely obliterated the opponent, what pose couldn't be seen then, even if it might be incomplete by that time. But it didn't matter. However, upon continuing, he still sensed something was off. After all, he was about to overdrive Xiaoyu to the point of smoking. Yet he sensed the opponent hadn't shattered. The opponent also possessed a force of continuous revival, countering his love unlimited. Logically, under such fierce attack, even if the great heavenly dog was truly a Vajra body, it should have shattered. Yet it didn't. With a thunderous explosion, Duan Yun and Dharma image Xiaoyu were swept backward, his twin blades dragging along the ground, leaving two very deep grooves before stabilizing his retreating form. The swirling dust gradually cleared, revealing the towering figure of the great heavenly dog. She was half kneeling on the ground, yet still nearly as tall as Duan Yun, holding a very lengthy sharp weapon. Indeed, she was already very tall, but the weapon in her hand was even longer, as if it were a spear pointing skyward. Next, the great heavenly dog's form shivered, and more weapons appeared within everyone's sight. Ziyu's face turned paper white, because she had thoroughly seen what it was. Bones. The great heavenly dog's back was filled with those ghastly white elongated bones, and the spear in her hand was also a bone. The tips of those bones hung with strips of cloth, at first glance, resembling war flags. Or, in the eyes of Duan Yun and Ziyu, her tall, voluptuous form was indeed covered with war flags. Ghastly white war flags. Ghastly white bones, now swirling with a dark red aura. The ground centered around her was riddled with holes, and to the naked eye, some white pillar-like fragments could be seen. Those were pieces of bone, just emerging from the earth, clashing with Duan Yun's blade storm. They should all be those bones. This snow mountain itself was constructed from a foundation of bones, and what they could see wasn't even the entire snow mountain. Below ground, deep beneath the earth, there were still countless of these bones. And just now, facing Duan Yun's love unlimited killing blow, the great heavenly dog used these bones to withstand Duan Yun's killing blow. Judging by this, she already had a profound connection with these bones, even inseparable as one. At this moment, she had already stood up with flags inserted throughout her body, like a female war god emerging from a mountain of corpses and seas of blood. She shook the longest spear in her hand, thrusting it toward the ground, and instantly numerous bones emerged, piercing from the ground at lightning speed. Immediately, she looked at Duan Yun and began walking over step by step, saying, "Humph! You know, the more pain I feel, the more pleasure I experience. The more pain, the more I can't resist. Humph!" As she spoke, she couldn't help but softly hum. Through the cracks of her broken mask, her gaze at Duan Yun was filled with desire. "I told you, you truly make me delighted. You're a man who can make me feel pain, truly rare indeed. Come, hit me hard, torture me. Let me feel more pain. Otherwise, I will quickly kill you." The demands she made were somewhat perverse, coupled with her full-bodied wild physique, resembling some kind of solicitation. Yet her voice was filled with an undeniable authority, as if Duan Yun couldn't hit her harder, hurt her, give her immense pain. she would subject Duan Yun to extreme punishment. If it were any other time, Duan Yun would certainly joke, "I've never seen anyone make such a request of me," and then strike hard. But this time he surprisingly felt pressured. He was somewhat worried he couldn't meet this woman's demands. Has young hero Duan also encountered a woman he couldn't satisfy? At this time, the great heavenly dog finished humming softly, stepped forward with a long leg, extended the bone spear, directly pointing at Duan Yun, saying, "Hurry up! I can't wait." Ziyu saw this and couldn't help but curse pervert. Had it not been known the two were fighting in a life-and-death duel, she would have thought she was writing idle books. At this moment, Duan Yun had completed his breathing control, and his battle intent surged once more. "Very well, next I will hit with all my might." Endless electric sword. The twin blades simultaneously struck out, yet what flew was a flowing electric sword. The electric sword curved in the air, instead of directly striking the tall form of the great heavenly dog. Its path aimed at the ghastly white bone war flags behind her. Crackling. The moment the electric sword collided with the white bones, the sound of the electric current striking instantly merged into one. At that moment, the endless electric sword was crazily ricocheting between the bone flag and the body of the great heavenly dog. Duan Yun first thought the white bones looked like battle flags, then like an antenna, so he used this antenna as a medium to play to his heart's content. A continuous stream of endless electric sword brought a non-stop, wild ricochet, turning the entire body of the great heavenly dog into a field of celestial light in no time. The great heavenly dog remained standing, sighing, "A bit numb, a bit itchy, can you give me more?" Duan Yun furrowed his brows. He had already noticed that ever since those bones appeared on this guy's body, not to mention his attack power, the toughness of his skin and flesh had skyrocketed. A crackling sound. The last spark of electricity leaped across, and the great heavenly dog looked at Duan Yun with eyes full of desire. "Hurry, I want more." Seeing that Duan Yun did not move, the bones on the great heavenly dog's back vibrated, and they lifted her into the air like a pair of wings. She spread her legs wide, with her massive, spiked body descending towards Duan Yun. In Duan Yun's eyes, this was more terrifying than a highway truck in an advertisement that can crash down a dragon. Because this was a spiked meat tank all over. Duan Yun was just about to evade, but his legs suddenly tightened as a series of white bones abruptly emerged from the ground. These bones couldn't pierce through his protective body sword chi, yet they did obstruct his ability to transform his physical stance. With this change in stance, it would be hard for him to avoid the crushing descent of Fate-Yin. The tall shadow of the great heavenly dog's body had already completely enveloped him, and he could already see a ravenous meat tank crashing down on him. Damn! Duan Yun thrust his dual swords into the ground fiercely. The moment the ground shattered, a black-breaking body sword chi column shot up from the earth. Seeing the pitch-black sword column, the great heavenly dog's eyes lit up and she said, "This move again!" Faced with the move that had just made her scream, "Yame Daddy," and even urinate, this time, not only did she not dodge, but she squeezed her legs together and rushed head-on. The breaking body sword chi column collided with the tall body of the great heavenly dog in an instant, causing her body to pause. From this angle, she looked like she was pierced by a pillar, yet in the next moment, she moved again, madly pressing down. In the eyes of others, it was as if she relied on the strength of her legs and hips, crushing the sword column, or rather, swallowing it. To Duan Yun, between her legs was like a gigantic mouth, swallowing his sword column. With the sword column swallowed, wouldn't she swallow me next? Break! Duan Yun's sword finger pointed upward fiercely, and two more sword columns erupted from the ground, shooting upward. Yet even with two additional sword columns, they still couldn't stop the downward force of the great heavenly dog. Previously, a single sword column could make her scream and urinate, but now with three, she was only letting out a pained groan. No, why does this groan have a hint of enjoyment? This was the first ever to enjoy inside his sword energy columns. Since you can handle so much, here's more good stuff from me. Demon electricity. Thunder fire great sword. With a shattering sound, Duan Yun's left arm swung back fiercely, and a spark of electricity leapt out swiftly. Almost simultaneously, heroic fire surged from his arm. The heroic fire and demon electricity rose with the wind, clashing instantly with the breaking body sword chi column. In just an instant, the three sword columns were ignited by thunder fire, turning thicker and larger, redder and hotter, like three giant burning rods furiously stabbing into the great heavenly dog. Ah! Yamei! At this moment, the great heavenly dog's tone finally changed. Alongside the cry of Yamei was the battered, bloodied fairy. As one of the great heavenly dog lord's most perfect creations, seeing her lord being skewered and crying was almost unbearable. She wished she could fly over and endure the pain for her. Truly, her pain was felt in my heart. This demon from Jojo marches with his columns and strikes with thunder and fire. Why is he so brutish? Can it be a bit gentler? The great body of the great heavenly dog is invincible, but it could still possibly get hurt. Facing the three thunder fire swords, the invincible body of the great heavenly dog indeed got injured. The thunder fire pierced through her skin, as if desperately drilling inside, continuing to scorch her flesh and blood. But the next moment, her voice became charming again. Yes, just like that. Just like that. Keep stabbing me. You bastard. Merge. Duan Yun clasped his palms together, and the three burning thunder fire swords involuntarily drew inward, merging into one. This time, the merged three thunder fire swords did not turn into a larger great sword form, but became thicker and rounder like a staff. Thunder fire great staff. Duan Yun realized that this woman did not fear sharpness, and that confronting her with a sword might not be effective, so he changed the form of the thunder fire greatsword, transforming it into the thunder fire great staff. In an instant, the burning staff entwined with lightning and flames, just like the Rui Jingu Bang of the Monkey King. As the staff formed, Duan Yun's right hand was already gripping this staff, and then his right arm muscle swelled, aligning with the shoulder muscles, pulling back as if drawing a giant bow to shoot a giant arrow. Stabbing force. In that moment, Duan Yun's whole body's muscles and tendons aligned as he thrust upward. A simple and straightforward thrust, much like a child imagining himself as a swordsman using all his strength to poke at cow dung, or poking into a cesspool with a bamboo stick, or as an adult marrying a woman using all his strength at night to thrust, completing life's growth. It was this thrust that nearly maxed out the explosive power Duan Yun could muster. Whizzing! The flames and demon electricity on the thunder fire staff surged, flowing along the staff's body. With this thrust, before the staff even moved, the surrounding air flowed like water. The great heavenly dog, due to gluttony, realizing this thrust was extraordinary, found it too late to retreat and avoid the sharpness. She could only clench her legs fiercely, attempting to use the clamping force of her legs to break this scorching giant staff. But this staff was simply too fierce, and with a simple, unadorned sound that soared to the sky, ah! Yamei butterflies! The great heavenly dog was stabbed and sent flying away. Her leg skin was burned to ashes, the blood inside instantly boiling, the flesh fully cooked. But the thrust was not simple in its momentum, continuing to stab wildly. As the stabbing force erupted, thunderfire bombarded the great heavenly dog without restraint. In just an instant, the great heavenly dog was enveloped by thunderfire, only a floating red hair visible. With a swoosh, her spear thrust downward, aiming to pry the thunderfire great staff away. The force of this thrust was also terrifying, and the thunderfire great staff instantly split in two. Yet the split thunderfire continued to barrage the opponent without hindrance. Like someone slicing water with a sword, the water still rushing through. But this staff was simply too fierce, and with a simple, unadorned sound that soared to the sky, ah! Yamei butterflies! The great heavenly dog was stabbed and sent flying away. Her leg skin was burned to ashes, the blood inside instantly boiling, the flesh fully cooked. But the thrust was not simple in its momentum, continuing to stab wildly. As the stabbing force erupted, thunderfire bombarded the great heavenly dog without restraint. In just an instant, the great heavenly dog was enveloped by thunderfire, only a floating red hair visible. With a swoosh, her spear thrust downward, aiming to pry the thunderfire great staff away. The force of this thrust was also terrifying, and the thunderfire great staff instantly split in two. Yet the split thunderfire continued to barrage the opponent without hindrance. Like someone slicing water with a sword, the water still rushing through. But this staff was simply too fierce, and with a simple, unadorned sound that soared to the sky, "Ah! Yame butterflies!" The great heavenly dog was stabbed and sent flying away. Her leg skin was burned to ashes, the blood inside instantly boiling, the flesh fully cooked. But the thrust was not simple in its momentum, continuing to stab wildly. As the stabbing force erupted, thunderfire bombarded the great heavenly dog without restraint. In just an instant, the great heavenly dog was enveloped by thunderfire, only a floating red hair visible. With a swoosh, her spear thrust downward, aiming to pry the thunderfire great staff away. The force of this thrust was also terrifying, and the thunderfire great staff instantly split in two. Yet the split thunderfire continued to barrage the opponent without hindrance. Like someone slicing water with a sword, the water still rushing through. As the passion-extinguishing staff was thrust out, the entire palace became scorching hot, so hot it made people want to roll on the ground and tear off their clothes. Xiu quickly used sword chi to protect herself, otherwise, she felt she would likely be scalded. At this time, the great heavenly dog had been struck by this staff, howling continuously. No one knew if it was from the hit or the heat, but the sound was miserable, and there was no longer any coquettish plea for Duan Yun's strength. Young hero Duan's strength is great. You have to endure it. Bang! Duan Yun's final move with this flaming staff was an upward thrust. A dazzling spark suddenly erupted, and the smoke it kicked up formed a mushroom cloud shape. The body of the great heavenly dog followed the style of the staff, crashing from the base of the Snow Mountain Palace to the higher grounds, carving out a huge rift. The Snow Mountain Palace, already magnificent and majestic at this moment, truly seemed to be on the verge of being torn apart. Countless white bones, along with the accumulated snow, fell down, and the bones on the ground were already piling up into a new bone mountain. By this time, the thunderfire around Duan Yun had dissipated, and he exhaled a long breath, appearing very exhausted. This kind of move required the maximum exertion of his flesh and true chi in a short time, and his extraordinary wisdom also had to output with full force. After all, he had to use his extraordinary wisdom to both temporarily create a cane move and control the heat, squeezing out enough power. At this moment he truly felt emptied. Moreover, there were now some minor internal injuries within him, caused by the rampaging true chi within his meridians. Because it was so coarse and large, some of his meridians couldn't bear it and developed small cracks. These cracks were real internal injuries, and it might take him 10 days to half a month to recover. However, Duan Yun's fingers weren't idle either. His fingertips emitted a few clusters of needle-like electric lights, repairing several more obvious cracks. This is the benefit of both being a hero upholding justice and possessing a medical practitioner's compassionate heart. In the same wounded condition, practicing both medicine and martial arts is indeed more impressive. His upper garment had long been burned clean by the thunderfire, revealing his firm chest and muscles that were still continuously trembling. In fierce battles like this, his clothes bursting was already a routine operation. Against ordinary opponents, usually the one whose clothes burst would be the other person, not him. But to make his clothes burst so thoroughly, this great heavenly dog was indeed quite a character. No one believed the great heavenly dog could survive such a cane style. Duan Yun prided himself on having some of its style. This move indeed seemed otherworldly, as if it came from the heavens. That woman with the rotten posterior saw this scene. Her heart, which had been hanging all this time, finally died. Oh my God! The great heavenly dog also had a day of being defeated. The great heavenly dog also had a day of being killed. The great heavenly dog has fallen. Truly, the heavenly court is empty, the demon is in the world. This world without the great heavenly dog is like a prison, is just a pile of crap. She was ultimately going to leave this pile of crap. Just leave this pile of crap to you guys. Let you rot in the crap. Let you eat the crap. This rotten posterior, until now, still wanted to win, so she cursed viciously. But the next moment, her venomous eyes that were originally starting to lose focus, about to die, suddenly brightened again. Above, where the great heavenly dog was bombarded to the heights of the snow mountain, suddenly came a noise and a burst of celestial music. Mighty immortal, with boundless mana. Mighty immortal, immortal and unyielding. Mighty immortal, living as long as the heavens. Yame! Yame layer upon layer. The celestial music's high-pitched notes were mixed with some strange sounds. Duan-Yun and Ziyu were both taken aback. Didn't die yet? Yes, the great heavenly dog still wasn't dead. When she was bombarded into the snow mountain cavern, at some point, a cloud of fog had risen. The fog looked very cold. Cold beyond reach at high altitudes, or perhaps immortal. Duan-Yun never understood the difference between an immortal's cloud and fog versus ordinary clouds and fog. Did it need to be whiter? But at this moment, he understood. It was a kind of feeling. Just like someone saying a woman is very scheming. You might not see it by just looking, but you gradually feel it when you interact with her. And the fog before him embodied this feeling, and now the feeling had materialized. Because this fog took on some shapes of auspicious clouds. Just like the patterns on some people, you could identify them at a glance. Is this fellow really going to become an immortal and resurrect? Clack, clack, clack. A dense noise rang out. Out of the ethereal immortal fog, numerous bones suddenly emerged. These bones were like long thorns, heavily overlapped, seemingly alive, constantly wriggling, producing a heart-stirring sound. This thing looked extremely dangerous, as if some great evil in the universe was about to be born, to the point where even Duan-Yun held his breath and focused his mind. In the next instant, the celestial clouds drifted, revealing the figure of the great heavenly dog once more. At this moment, it was hard to see her visage, even though the mask on her face was gone. Layers and circles of bones grew from within her, like armor forged from bones, flowing around her body. More eye-catching was a very long bone at the nape of her neck. This bone stretched straight up, like a pillar supporting the sky. For a moment, Duan-Yun acknowledged her title of Mighty Immortal. Is this still a human? Ziyu said with a face full of terror. And the rotten posterior fairy, who was about to breathe her last, came back to life again, even sitting up, shouting, Mighty Immortal, live as long as the heavens. As long as there is the great heavenly dog lord, the human world is beautiful. What, the human world is like a prison? The human world is a pile of dung. Those are all nonsense. This human world is simply an immortal realm. From above came the seductive immortal voice of the great heavenly dog. This immortal originally intended to duel you in a mortal form, but you have shown no respect for this immortal. Then I will reluctantly crush you with my immortal body, domineering, full of breath, like an irrefutable command. Whether this guy has become an immortal is unknown, but from his voice, it can be expected that he hasn't suffered any major injuries. Remember that just now, Duan-Yun's intense stabbing force was akin to splitting a mountain, coupled with a fierce onslaught of thunderfire. Even a block of mystic iron would have melted. Yet, the great heavenly dog stood up again, stepping on the clouds as if nothing happened. It can be called a medical miracle. And with it came an even more dangerous aura. The great heavenly dog was now covered in bone armor, no longer resembling a human.
Mortal, prepare to die.
The armor on the great heavenly dog spun, turning into a pair of bone wings made of elongated white bones. In the next moment, with a flap of her bone wings, she dove towards Duan-Yun. Accompanying her charge was a towering bone spear emerging from her neck. In an instant, a gust of wind rushed at him, and in the originally snowing weather, A huge vortex appeared in a blink of an eye. Before she arrived, the blowing wind was like a blade, extremely sharp. Duan-Yun dared not be careless. He gritted his teeth, grabbed his shoulder with his right hand, and roared, "Open!" With a boom, it was as if the engine of a supercar was violently ignited once more. Thunderfire surged through Duan-Yun's body, stretching out with a thunderous roar, forming a pair of wings. Thunderfire wings. In the next moment, the ground beneath him sunk a foot as he charged forward against the wind. The vast interior of this hollow snow mountain suddenly felt cramped, because the force both of them unleashed was enough to suffocate people. Boom! The air currents in the sky rolled, and in Ziyu's eyes, the two were already locked in combat. Indeed, combat, the most primitive kind of combat. She could see their wings slapping, angling, overlapping, even tearing at each other. Their speed was extremely fast, and Ziyu could only determine that the blurry figure surging with Thunderfire was Duan-Yun, while where the great heavenly dog passed was a patch of pure white. Pure white bones, pure white snow, pure white clouds, all formed a pure white world. Duan-Yun disregarded the injuries in his meridians, eager only to tear his opponent into pieces. Yet he found that the more force he exerted, the stronger his opponent became, or rather, the more immortal. The overwhelming whiteness kept invading his surroundings, which he warded off with Thunderfire. But Duan-Yun was well aware that this was a sign he was at a disadvantage. This feeling was akin to being in the middle of a vast wind and snow. His flames around him could ward off the cold, but for how long? This guy really became immortal. Duan-Yun's Thunderfire wings flapped, turning his figure into a fleeting shadow. Where he had just stood, dozens of white bones shot out in unison, piercing his shadow, narrowly missing him. Now the great heavenly dog was all bones, looking like either a ball or a hedgehog covered in spines. Calling it the Bone King wouldn't be an overstatement. Seeing another wave of aggressive attacks, Duan-Yun planned to switch to defense. His internal electromagnetic power instantly pushed to the extreme. Electromagnetic sword field. In an instant, electricity spread out, forming a sword field. Electric swords shuttled back and forth within it at extreme speed. The great heavenly dog's body suddenly slowed down, but Duan-Yun became faster. Because he was now one with the surrounding sword light, the expanded electromagnetic sword field provided resistance for the great heavenly dog, while the surrounding electric swords assisted Duan-Yun. This difference in speed was stark. In the blink of an eye, Duan-Yun merged with over a dozen electromagnetic swords, his figure transforming into swirling electromagnetic shadows, thrusting at the great heavenly dog with 24 swords. Each sword was breaking body sword energy combined with Thunderfire, stabbing fiercely through the gaps in the great heavenly dog's bones. In that moment, Duan-Yun truly resembled a sword-wielding sword immortal, controlling everything within the electromagnetic sword field. Nobody understands the electromagnetic sword field better than I do, and the great heavenly dog suddenly had over a dozen Thunderfire swords embedded in her, looking like a fierce beast undergoing execution. Yet her life force remained strong, filled with vigor, but within Duan-Yun's sword field, her speed had notably slowed, giving the impression of restrained strength. Though this scene showed Duan-Yun at an advantage, Ziyu's heart was still in her throat. She didn't know why, but Duan-Yun being on the upper hand made her more uneasy than when he was at a disadvantage. In fact, her feeling was correct, because the electromagnetic sword field itself was extremely taxing on Duan-Yun. It can be said that he had turned this area into Duan-Yun's home turf. If Duan-Yun could not kill or at least severely injure the opponent within the effective time, rendering them incapacitated for battle, he would be the one suffering next. Because if Dantian is the fuel tank of a martial artist, then true Qi is the fuel, and Duan-Yun's internal fuel was running low. Without fuel, even the strongest Ferrari cannot run. But the creature before him seemed to have absurdly thick skin. And as she became more familiar with the sword field, she could initiate some strange counterattacks. The bones around the great heavenly dog began to shoot. Facing the lightning-fast Duan-Yun, her shooting seemed chaotic, but in fact, harbored an odd force. With every bone thrust, an extra cloud-like force appeared in the air. These forces intertwined like gathering clouds. Duan Yun quickly realized that the space around her was filled with this force, requiring him to forcefully break through before he could continue his attack. Duan Yun knew he couldn't wait any longer. 3 Thunderfire great swords were thrown from his hand. Faced with the crushing momentum of the Thunderfire sword, the cloud forces couldn't stop much, and the only sounds heard were the muffled hisses as 3 more Thunderfire swords pierced into the great heavenly dog. Now, the number of Thunderfire swords on the great heavenly dog had grown to 18.
Unite.
Duan Yun's whole body exuded black-breaking body sword energy, forcing himself past the cloud force, landing on the great heavenly dog's back. The great heavenly dog's back immediately reacted, white bones stabbing up like ground thorns. Duan Yun paid no heed, pressing down hard with both feet. With a tearing sound, his boots exploded, the sharp bone spurs piercing the skin under his feet, and if not for the frantic resistance of the protective true qi, they might have penetrated his flesh. Yet Duan Yun still ignored this and sank down, gripping 2 Thunderfire great swords with both hands.
Ah!
As Duan Yun let out a fierce roar, the 18 Thunderfire swords embedded in the great heavenly dog twisted simultaneously. Duan Yun aimed to connect the 18 Thunderfire swords with a magnetic field, forming an even sharper Thunderfire sword formation. This sword formation had the ruthless heat of Thunderfire, coupled with the extremely sharp edge of breaking body death energy sword qi. Even an immortal must yield to its slicing, burning to their heart's content. At this moment, the great heavenly dog let out a cry of pain. This was the first time she made such a sound since ascending and reviving. Clearly, the great heavenly dog also realized the danger, followed by shouting, "The Supreme is on the invincible road. Why fear others on the path to slay gods? Supreme bone domain open." That towering long bone of hers descended, as if a long spear fiercely pierced her body from the back of her neck. Duan Yun even saw a section of bone emerge from her groin. Did it penetrate through completely? In the next moment, the bones on her body seemed to come alive, rolling towards the Thunderfire swords on her body. Yes, rolling like a snake. In that instant, these bones became as flexible as a snake's body. The bones quickly coiled around the Thunderfire swords, immobilizing them. What troubled Duan Yun even more was that the Thunderfire was being swallowed. It felt as if the Thunderfire swords had become blocks of fat, while the bones were like ferocious piranhas, voraciously devouring the Thunderfire swords. Damn! Extraordinary wisdom. What to do? At this moment, an irked Duan Yun suddenly had a flash of inspiration, deciding to execute his most astonishing move. 10-layered spring rain, 16 strange fist, romantic toy, 7 points to the original energy. Charge, charge, charge. In that instant, Duan Yun was surrounded by various shadows, ready to charge. In an instant, Duan Yun fused all the martial arts techniques, sword, saber, fist, and kick, into one. This was the inspiration he had just gained from the 16-road Chi Fist through his extraordinary wisdom. Since the 16-road Chi Fist can be linked as one move through the preceding 15-road Chi Fist, culminating in the most powerful 16-road Chi Fist. Why couldn't he fuse all martial arts into one? The method of the 16-road Chi Fist is already unique and even somewhat astonishing, and now what he intends to do is tenfold more astounding than the 16-road Chi Fist. Ultimately, the 16-road Chi Fist is within the same category of fist technique, whereas Duan Yun has learned a complex array sword, saber, fist, kick, and finger technique, fundamentally different systems which he now aims to forcibly integrate. At first glance, it seems like a forced amalgamation, giving the impression of forcing a ship to sail under adverse winds until it's inevitably destroyed. But Duan Yun's strength lies in making the impossible possible, for he possesses extraordinary wisdom. It's perfectly reasonable for extraordinary wisdom to yield something astonishing. At once, Duan Yun elevated the execution speed of various martial arts to the extreme. Even Dharma image Xiao Yu and Qing appeared, replacing part of his moves. From afar, it seemed as if he had grown several shadows all over his body, or like a god or demon with 3 heads and 6 arms, launching a fierce assault on the great heavenly dog covered in white bones. The red line sword chi, infiltrating every pores, reached first. Pain quickly spread throughout the great heavenly dog. The great heavenly dog shrieked in pain, but the rotating white bones around instantly shredded the sword chi. Immediately after, there was a combined onslaught of fist power, finger strength, palm strength, sword chi, and even the pants Duan Yun swung forth metamorphosed into sharp weapons. They were originally completely different techniques, yet at this moment they merged into one. Much like 7 independent women claiming they would never tolerate any man's wavering affections, only to become part of a harmonious harem of one man despite initial resistance. It's absurd, yet it truly exists. Because young hero Duan possesses extraordinary wisdom. Unfortunately, young hero Duan felt it was still insufficient, because this technique still lacked seamlessness, like a woman needing further education if not suitable. Again, in an instant, fist, kick shadows, sword light, and sword shadow emerged simultaneously around Duan Yun, his limbs dancing incessantly like whirling gusts. If watched alone, Duan Yun's moves might even seem ludicrous because he resembled one feigning a martial arts genius using counterfeit tricks. Yet once connected with the forces, this move was far from comical. Even the immortal great heavenly dog felt a chill down the spine. In her eyes, this man was a maniac, one whose craziness even the immortal gods feared. Humans have limits, but this person's madness seemed boundless. How could a person perform such bizarre and eerie techniques? In her eyes, Duan Yun wasn't merely using techniques like sword, saber, fist, kick simultaneously. He seemed to be dancing with several diametrically different women simultaneously. Did he visualize these martial arts as women? What a perverse thought. Even more perverse was this concept gradually becoming reality. After becoming an immortal, the great heavenly dog, who never perceived any threat, now felt endangered, bone spikes burgeoning like a blossoming massive bone flower. With a thunderous crash, Duan Yun essentially launched his 7 girlfriends, originally having distinct personalities, each an independent woman, even somewhat beyond control. Yet at this moment they coexisted harmoniously, emitting a perfect rhythm. Booming, the entwining forces obliterated and shattered the great heavenly dog like breaking dry branches, inflicting a condition as if desperately seeking to become a great hero amid adverse situations. But the great heavenly dog clung steadfastly, bone spikes ceaselessly growing, resisting this dreadful barrage. A loud crash, her body slammed into the snow mountain. This slam did not aggravate her injuries. Instead, it provided a noticeable boost. The snow on the mountain, akin to flesh and blood, seemingly came alive, continuously spreading around her body, composing new flesh and bones for her. This formed a cycle of Duan Yun's attacks relentlessly destroying, and her incessantly rebuilding her body. There was a rumor that immortals can be reborn from a drop of blood. While the great heavenly dog hasn't reached this level, she was nearing that state. Duan Yun knew that things could turn unfavorable for him if this continued. Because although his move is immensely powerful, capable of flinging numerous adverse states upon the enemy in an instant, it still places his flesh and blood in a state of high-speed operation. His flesh was already scalding, probably exceeding 90 degrees. Akin to fans claiming their idol persisted in work despite a high fever of over 90 degrees. But after all, he isn't an idol and cannot endure indefinitely, while the great heavenly dog's regeneration seemed endless. 7 points to the original energy. Chi! At this point, the long unreleased 7 points to the original energy was finally unleashed. Duan Yun seldom uses 7 points to the original energy, as it involves the power of destiny, requiring a relatively long charging period even for him to activate. Moreover, this is a technique inclined towards bullying the weak, which is to say, against weaker opponents it can manipulate their destiny with ease, but against stronger adversaries, inflicting damage on their destiny will recoil upon the user. Yet the great heavenly dog is an exceptionally formidable opponent, especially given that she has become an immortal. her destiny likely even more extraordinary. However, at this juncture, Duan Yun didn't care for such details, decisively adding this weight. His column of chi force shot up to the sky, and the invisible chi force surged so intensely that it made Ziyu at the battlefield's perimeter involuntarily tense her legs, feeling as though some colossal entity was about to descend upon them. The great heavenly dog's chi force column followed suit, but it appeared to be white. A bone-chilling white as snow. Duan Yun's eyes were resolute. His own column of chi force transformed into a giant hand reaching for the great heavenly dog's chi force column. That giant hand of chi force wavered, trying to utterly destroy the great heavenly dog's chi force column. But the great heavenly dog proclaimed herself as a supreme immortal, with a skyward-reaching, unbreakably sturdy bony spike, and so was her chi force column, making it difficult to break it once. At this critical moment, the great heavenly dog's eyes narrowed as she shouted, "I want to be the great hero. Ba, ba, ba." She quickly straightened her tongue, saying, "Chi fortune? Mere mortals dare play with chi fortune before me, the supreme immortal. I, the great hero, Ba, the supreme immortal, will show you what truly manipulating chi fortune means." With a boom, the great heavenly dog's white chi force column twisted, becoming straighter and harder, its surface sprouting vein-like patterns like a pillar supporting the heavens. At this moment, the heavenly pillar quivered violently, directly bursting Duan Yun's giant hand apart. With a snap, Duan Yun's chi force hand was shattered, unable to control the opponent's chi force any longer. No, he also suffered a backlash, feeling a sweetness in his throat as he spat out a mouthful of blood. At this time, the great heavenly dog not only freed her chi force column from Duan Yun's grasp, but her once passive body also stood upright. She waved her now bare-boned right hand, and immediately the skeleton emitted a series of crackling pops like exploding peas. Her bones were operating like a machine. A glance revealed her entire arm turned into an incredibly precise weapon, going through the process of loading. With a crunch, the loading was complete. The next moment, it fired. In an instant, the great heavenly dog shot her entire right arm forward like a hurricane with thunderclaps, trailing a stream of jumping lightning in its wake. Duan Yun had to withdraw part of his strength, forming a vortex-like defense. But at this moment, another transformation occurred. The great heavenly dog's entire right arm suddenly exploded midway. The explosion was chaotic, it was disorderly, but her arm moved with order, with intent. The whole arm turned into 7 skeletal swords, leaping towards Duan Yun. With a couple of swooshes, Duan Yun's defensive force blocked 5 bone swords, but the remaining 2 still pierced through his right calf and left shoulder. The great heavenly dog lost her right arm, causing Duan Yun moderate injuries. On the surface, this seemed unwise. Duan Yun only had 2 holes in his leg and shoulder, while she had lost an entire arm. But a fanatical glint appeared in the great heavenly dog's eyes, for she had pressed her severed limb into the snow mountain. The snow mountain's snow and bones writhed, forming a new arm's embryonic shape. The great heavenly dog shouted with fervor, "Mortal, do you understand the meaning of eternal immortality? In this snow mountain, having become an immortal, she could continually regenerate at a mere trifling cost." Upon seeing this, Ziyu went pale and planned to seize an opportunity to flee with Duan Yun, while on the other side, that woman with a rotten backside was delighted, her eyes showing fierceness, having read Ziyu's intentions. This woman dared to flee with that dog man. She would do all she could to cling to their leg and drag them, allowing the great heavenly dog to slay them properly. At this moment, the woman with the rotten backside ground her teeth until they cracked, even breaking her gums. Duan Yun, feeling the pain coursing through his wounds, spat out a mouthful of bloody foam, saying, "You forced me." "Still pretending?" "Forced you, so what? Do you know how the supreme immortal became one? By sheer force. Mortal, if you have the guts, come and beat me to death then." Duan Yun's lips curled into a smile, saying, "No more reservations." He couldn't stand such pretense. Red hair, Come on. At that moment, a red glow emanated from Duan Yun's body. This red glow was dark, not particularly bright or dazzling, nor large, like a ball of fire throbbing in Duan Yun's heart. But at that moment, the previously arrogant great heavenly dog showed signs of caution, even faint fear, for she smelled an ominous scent. What is misfortune? Unexplainable, indescribable, yet it gave a sense of profound mystery and terror. Even the immortal great heavenly dog felt it. In the next moment, Duan Yun bowed his head, and his entire body became covered in red hair. Ha! The great heavenly dog involuntarily took a step back. At this moment, her severed limb was regenerating, her foot on clouds, her entire being snow-white and ethereal. If one said that moments ago, Duan Yun was like a raving lunatic, now his red-haired form resembled a demon. No, something even more terrifying than a demon. In the mortal world, a saying goes that the heavenly court had been destroyed, and what destroyed them were demons. Other demons roamed the world too. The Source Palace nobles also spoke of the demon's scourge across the mortal land, from which none of the celestials, not even the fairies, could escape. Yet, some said that although immortals and demons are opposed, immortals emerge generation after generation, so how could demons easily vanquish them? It was something far scarier that brought them down. This latter interpretation was indeed more accurate. At least for the great heavenly dog, it was more accurate, as she had once visited the defeated heavenly court and learned much more. In her understanding, it was a presence more horrifying than demons. And Duan Yun at that moment reminded her of that very presence. Something scarier than demons? What bullshit thing! How dare such a thing disturb my immortal's mind? Only an illusion. An illusion. Die for my immortal. With that said, this time she extended her right leg. A meaty and long right leg covered in bones. Just like before, the bones in her right leg were scraping, transforming into a lethal weapon. The bones and flesh of this leg were evidently much stronger than that of her arm, naturally making it a more formidable existence. No, the great heavenly dog pushed even harder this time, because at this moment, her left leg also extended. Her limbs could reconstruct, but achieving such perfection wasn't easy. Yet, at that moment, she gambled with her flawless legs, aiming for Duan Yun's life. But at that moment, a mocking smile spread across Duan Yun's face, because he saw through her fear. That ominous red fur scared even him, not to mention her. Come on! In the next moment, the great heavenly dog's legs both shot out in a blaze, appearing like two brilliant streams of fire. Duan Yun didn't take a step. He just stood there. Yet he exuded an aura as if he were supporting the heavens and earth. Cannon of the mortal world. With two blasts, Duan Yun's red fur converged into his arms. This red fur, layered upon itself, formed a flowing crimson, resembling cannonballs charging up with energy. Fire! Almost simultaneously, two cannonballs composed of red fur flew out, colliding with the great heavenly dog's white legs. With two explosive booms, the space turned to a field of red and white, emitting a piercing screech, like both a phoenix's cry and a dragon's roar, altogether forming a song of ice and fire. As the song faded, the two formidable forces abruptly dissipated. The great heavenly dog's eyes sparkled because, at that moment, she extended her arms. In this snow mountain, she could infinitely regenerate severed limbs, equating to infinite firepower. How could you contest me? Yet, in the next moment, she was stupefied. For Duan Yun stood there again, covered in red fur as if they'd never left his body. Weren't your hairs shot out? Are you a goddamn monkey? For your hair to grow so fast. No, even monkey hair doesn't grow so fast. Keep firing. At that point, Duan Yun's red fur gathered once more, forming into a cannon for a strike. A bitter expression formed over the great heavenly dog's face, as her legs just began regrowing. In this confrontation, she seemingly held no advantage. Faced with the great heavenly dog continually firing bone arrows, Duan Yun could only enter the red hair cannon mode to return fire. Originally, he really didn't want to use this red hair, because he had long discovered that this ominous red hair indeed had something that caused him to experience some auditory hallucinations. Those hallucinations seemed to come from another world, speaking human language yet not quite human, as if trying to drag him into another realm. Duan Yun wasn't necessarily afraid of anything. He just felt it somewhat affected his sleep. People need to sleep. How can a young hero battle demons and monsters effectively if he doesn't sleep well? But this moment, since the opponent was being so unreasonable, he couldn't bother with that right now. Even at the cost of several months of poor sleep, this young hero will kill you. Fire the cannon. The red hair once again gathered into a cannon and fired at the great heavenly dog. Auspicious clouds surrounded the great heavenly dog, while the snow and bones on the snow mountain were continuously absorbed and devoured by her, transforming into new limbs. At this time, she also shot the supreme immortal bone arrow at Duan Yun, with a loud explosion, accompanied by a layered series of sound waves. The incomplete people hanging on the hooks outside the snow mountain were now all blasted straight out by the gale, looking like they were about to be dried by the wind. While Ziyu reacted swiftly, leaping several meters high, the moon-shielding light-shaming sword in her hand formed a swirling sword light, deflecting the incoming fragments of bones, snow, and red hair. Of course, most of them bounced back to that woman with tattered pants. Only the woman with tattered pants stood stiff as a corpse, with both the sacred white and ominous red on her body, making her look multicolored, as if she opened a dye shop. Seeing the fragments bounced over by Ziyu, she couldn't help but associate that the other party did it intentionally. But she had no time to care about this. She was already using her willpower to extract the last bits of life energy, wanting to see the conclusion. As long as Great Heavenly Dog achieved the final victory, all her suffering would be worthwhile because Great Heavenly Dog would surely torture this pair of dog couples. Above, Duan Yun and the Great Heavenly Dog had exchanged shots 7 times. Each time, earth-shattering commotion ensued. Mushroom-like waves surged on the snow mountain, erupting, looking like a volcano had come to life. In Source Valley, where snow doesn't usually fall, goose feather-sized snow suddenly fell. The snowflakes, coupled with bones, crashed onto the cherry blossom trees, splitting and destroying the blooms, resembling an apocalyptic scene. At this point, Duan Yun's ears were already filled with ominous voices like, "I've made it. Hug me if you love me. Moo moo moo." 2 molds. While the great heavenly dog's hands and feet respawned rapidly, unable to keep up with the rate of depletion. For instance, now her arms were as short as a baby's arms, having been forced to shoot them out. With a thunderous roar, this time, the victor of the strength struggle was determined. Those baby-like arms couldn't explode into bone swords in time. They were blasted away by Duan Yun's red hair cannon. The ominous red hair only slightly lost momentum, immediately barreling towards the great heavenly dog's body. The great heavenly dog let out a high-pitched scream of agony, her face suddenly filled with terror. No! No! She constantly felt tainted by this ominous thing, making herself and the entire world dirty and unable to become an immortal. Whoosh whoosh! Duan Yun gasped heavily, the red hair on his body continuing to grow. His ears were filled with auditory hallucinations, like one after another glamorous seductive horses trying to lure him into another world. At this moment, his extraordinary wisdom turned. Past memories unique to himself flowed like a revolving lantern through his mind. He recalled the kick from Xuanxiong gang disciples that sent him flying, which could be said to be where his dreams began. Afterwards, he encountered the Morong brothers, met Feng Linger, met Shining. He gained friends, had Yuzhu Manor, and embarked on the journey of a young hero. Those memories were like one anchor point after another in the stormy seas, or the warm lights of a harbor that he could find a way back even amidst the storms. This is truly me. Duan Yun the young hero, Duan Lang the young hero, Morong Fu the young hero. It's these people who define me. Duan Yun's eyes cleared in an instant. The auditory hallucinations in his ears suddenly diminished, as if those seductive horses had put on clothes, weakening the seduction. At this time, the great heavenly dog was still struggling, defiantly resisting. The snow on the snow mountain had melted around her, gathering to her body, trying to wash away the red hair and reshape her figure. "How dare you resist my red hair? The verdict is more severe." Speaking, Duan Yun raised his right fist. The newly grown red hair on his body instantly circulated to his right arm, forming new red hair. At this moment, the great heavenly dog's body full of fractured bones still reconstructing, merging. But the affable young hero, merciless judge, decrees your death, and you must die. The projectile formed from red hair turned into a crimson glow, smashing towards the great heavenly dog. "Yame butterfly," the great heavenly dog shouted with a heavy Fusang accent. But the ominous red hair paid no heed to her cries, mercilessly accelerating, piercing her body. The next moment, the great heavenly dog was already trembling violently, as if her entire body was shivering continuously, while her eyes rolled back, mouth agape, tongue protruding, drooling excessively, in a state of extreme humiliation and incapability. Or, in her heart, as long as she was tainted by these red hairs, the immortal in her was subjected to immense defilement, and her whole being became filthy. This is the destructive power of the red hair against the immortal. Duan Yun steadied himself, feeling that things should be just about settled now. Yes, the outcome has been decided. This great heavenly dog seemed completely powerless, as if incapacitated, unable to fight back at all. Even the jixia and bones that constantly reshaped her body had stopped moving. Duan Yun knew it was time to reclaim his divine sword. This day the fat woman had been slain without even brandishing the sword to resist, proving she was not an exceptional genius in sword Dao. Leaving the divine sword with her was a sheer waste of resources. Duan Yun walked over, looking at the great heavenly dog, who had collapsed there, rolling her eyes and drooling, and he extended the hand of young hero, beaming divine skill. Just as Duan Yun was about to extract the great heavenly dog's memories to locate the divine sword, a voice suddenly rang out. "Immortal! What is immortal? The master who enslaves all creatures of heaven and earth. Those who insult the gods, reverse the heavenly gang, must kill the entire family." This voice was clearly angry, yet to Duan Yun's ears, it carried no emotion. Or rather, it was a voice so cold, colder than the snow at the peak of Snow Mountain. If one had to describe it, it was quite celestial, like the celestial sound from the Moon Palace Jade Pool. Is this the celestial sound? At this moment, the great heavenly dog suddenly burst out laughing, saying, "It's here! It's here! I, the immortal, cannot be killed. Snow from Yujing heavenly sky, aid me to enslave the heavens and earth." Suddenly, the great heavenly dog, who had been rolling her eyes and sticking out her tongue, lifted her right hand, and a sharp bone immediately stabbed toward Duan Yun. Duan Yun responded swiftly. His extended right palm instantly transformed into a fist and collided with that bone. With a bang, Duan Yun only felt a powerful force coming at him, and his body swept backward. The clearly incapacitated great heavenly dog acted again. When will it end? Success! I've succeeded again. Ha ha ha! The great heavenly dog laughed heartily, her figure swaying as she approached Duan Yun. Her regenerating limbs were still as short as a baby's, but her speed was incredibly fast. In an instant, she reached Duan Yun's side and struck down with her elbow. "Man!" Instinctively, Duan Yun followed with an elbow strike. With a bang, their elbows collided, and the shockwaves rolled. Ziyu and the woman with the terrible backside were knocked to the ground by the force, and the shockwaves swept past, filling their ears with the sound of "man." The next moment, the two who thought the end had come were entangled once more. This is true entanglement. At this point, the red hair on Duan Yun surged wildly again, turning him completely scarlet, resembling a malevolent star suspended in the sky. Meanwhile, the great heavenly dog turned white, a mix of deathly white and jade white appearing on her body. Her surrounding bones changed, sometimes soft like a snake, crazily entwining, and sometimes as hard as iron, chopping toward Duan-Yun. If one had to describe it, it seemed as if her entire body was covered with chain swords, crazily slashing at Duan-Yun. In the blink of an eye, they exchanged hundreds of blows. The ominous red and the cold white intertwined, as if a blood moon and a cold moon were biting each other. Ziyu looked up, unable to help but marvel. Hey! Is this still the human world? Visibly, the great heavenly dog's power continued to rise. She became increasingly white, with more and more bones appearing on her body. Damn immortal!
Infinite mana.
As she shouted, 2 segments of bone suddenly protruded from her eyes, leaving her a mere human figure, without a trace of human shadow. At this point, the bones around her neck formed into a shape resembling a soul ring, making her look like a monster entirely covered in bones. Meanwhile, Duan-Yun's red hair grew ceaselessly, as if alive, confronting those bones. Duan-Yun's gaze turned hollow, and in Ziyu's eyes, he appeared very empty. So empty it seemed as if he would vanish from this world. This emptiness filled her with fear, because she couldn't face the thought of Duan-Yun's disappearance at all. Yes, even if she were an author, capable of deceiving herself, convincing herself that she felt nothing for old demon Duan. Even if he embraced her naked, she wouldn't react at all. But at the thought of not being able to explain to the 2 women of Yuzhu Manor, and that blindly confident man, she felt fear and terror. In that moment, she seemed to hear their questioning voices. You went out together, why did only you come back? We went out with him so many times. Why did something happen the one time with you? Are you a waste or what? Was he captured and locked up in some black room? Give him back to us. For a moment, Ziyu's eyes turned green. In the eyes of the woman with the terrible backside, her sword's light turned green as well. That greenness made her appear terrifying. Yes, in the eyes of the woman with the terrible backside, even if there were 10 Ziyu, they couldn't harm a hair of Great Heavenly Dog Lord. The residual aura from Great Heavenly Dog Lord alone could easily kill her. But at this moment, she felt a sense of danger. This green-eyed woman could indeed pose a threat to the now immortal and godlike Great Heavenly Dog Lord. Unable to help it, she said, "Sneak attacks are disgraceful and dishonorable in the martial world." Ziyu didn't hear what she was doing at all. The green of her sword and eyes already aimed at the direction of Duan-Yun and the Great Heavenly Dog. Currently, Duan-Yun was certainly amidst ominous and raging waves. Even if he grasped some anchors, those anchors seemed fragile in that colossal storm. But at this moment, there came a soft ugh sound, and Duan-Yun felt the overwhelming pressure ease. His mind cleared, staying lucid, and the red hair on his body was suppressed. At this moment, he saw the Great Heavenly Dog, who was originally attacking him madly, now struggling furiously, as if something was choking her. Duan-Yun, while stroking his red hair, looked over and exclaimed, "Driven to madness?" Indeed, the Great Heavenly Dog looked like she was driven to madness, or perhaps possessed by evil. It felt as if something invisible was ravaging her. With a loud bang, her body slammed against the snow mountain wall, and she uttered cries for mercy, like "Yame! Yame butterfly!" These cries sounded extremely miserable, completely different from the domineering arrogance she had earlier displayed. At this moment, the cold white on her body flickered, and she appeared to be shining. Rustle! Rustle! The Great Heavenly Dog clung tightly to the snow mountain walls with her hands and feet, yet her body involuntarily slid upward, leaving long furrows across the mountain. Such a scene would seem sinister and eerie, even to someone as ominous as Duan-Yun. This situation clearly exceeded the scope of mere madness. "No, don't! Yame, Yame butterfly!" The cries of the Great Heavenly Dog had already surpassed the realm of certain Fusang adult film stars. What on earth is happening? Duan-Yun had controlled his red hair and stepped on his right foot to reach a higher place, looking down below. Suddenly, a crack appeared on the snow mountain wall where the Great Heavenly Dog was. Inside the crack, it was white and red, resembling a texture of marbled meat with a jade-like luster, emanating a sinister aura. In the next instant, A suction force seemed to spill out, and the great heavenly dog's body was uncontrollably drawn inward. No! Don't! Her limbs were still desperately clinging to the snow mountain walls, preventing herself from falling. With two snapping sounds, the bones on her eyeballs fell off, exposing two bleeding eyes. Logically speaking, she was already blind, yet she suddenly turned to where Duan Yun was, saying, "Save me! Save me!" Her voice was filled with sorrow and wretchedness. Since Duan Yun's debut, he's fought many battles, killed many people, encountering curses from the dying, begging for mercy during brawls, and even hopeful attempts at reconciliation. He had seen it all in various scenarios. But encountering an enemy pleading for help at the last moment was a first. Even more absurd, Duan Yun, who had long resolved to add to her sins and kill her entire family, surprisingly felt a moment of soft-heartedness, genuinely wanting to save her, because he sensed the despair and wretchedness of a fellow being. Just as Duan Yun's body sank, attempting to reach out, there were several snapping sounds, and the great heavenly dog's limbs exploded, her entire body dropping into the crack. Duan Yun rushed over. The crack had already closed to only a seam. He peered inside through the seam and saw only a field of crimson and white. Inside it was like smoke, like mist. Glimpses of a mortal palace lotus could be seen, resembling a true immortal realm. Yet there was a fleshy redness amid this cold and clear realm. The great heavenly dog's body was still nearby. She floated there, miserably saying, "Save me! Boo-hoo! I've already achieved it. Achieved it. I'm so unwilling. So unwilling." In the next moment, an extremely shrill scream suddenly echoed. Within the clouds and mist, a pair of pristine white giant hands seemed to stretch out. The giant hands directly grasped the bones on the great heavenly dog's body, tearing them apart. In the next instant, the great heavenly dog's body was suddenly torn like paper, her miserable screams piercing the ears.
I'm unwilling.
Ah!
I'm unwilling.
The great heavenly dog cried miserably while saying. In the end, her entire being was about to be completely shredded, and her blood-filled eyes suddenly stared in Duan Yun's direction, saying, my sword is under the Iron Throne.
I'm unwilling."
As soon as she finished speaking, she completely transformed into fragments, scattering within the surrounding immortal mist. The great heavenly dog had already been torn to pieces by something, drifting into the mist like a fairy scattering flower petals. Soon after, that strange crack also began to close up. It was like a wound healing rapidly. Duan Yun raised his blade, wanting to pry it open, but found it extremely difficult. In the blink of an eye, the crack had completely closed, and that world, like the Yaoqi Immortal Palace, disappeared from Duan Yun's sight. The sensation that was both ethereal and terribly frightening also dissipated with it. Only now did Duan Yun realize his back was drenched in cold sweat. Just now, peering through the crack, he had felt an overwhelming sense of presence, as if alongside the great heavenly dog being torn apart, he too was being shredded. The great heavenly dog was very strong. One could say it was among the strongest opponents he had ever faced. Yet just now she was torn apart so easily, as simply as tearing paper. What in the world was in there? And where exactly was that? Could it be that behind this snow mountain crack was truly the legendary Yaoqi Immortal Palace? The Source Palace noble's previous diary mentioned that the great heavenly dog had seized 2 divine swords, thus gaining the ability to open the passage to heaven and earth. Could that really be the legendary heavenly court? But didn't the great heavenly dog previously say that the heavenly court no longer had immortals, only divine soil remained? No, that's not right. In the final moment, he had vaguely seen a sign, shrouded in cloud and mist, faintly inscribed with the characters, Jade Capital. Jade Capital? Duan Yun had landed back on the ground and couldn't help but question in confusion. He couldn't help but recall a poem. In the sky, white jade city, 12 towers and 5 cities. An immortal caresses my crown, binding my hair for eternal life. This is a poem by Li Bai, and White Jade City could basically represent the celestial palaces. Could it be that what he just saw was truly the White Jade City? The heavenly palace? The heavenly court? Duan Yun knew well that in this world, there was no Li Bai and no one should know of this poem, but there should be legends of the White Jade City. At this time, Duan Yun couldn't help but look again in the direction of the crack, heart still lingering with fear. The crack had vanished, and the terrifying sensation had disappeared along with it, but the horrifying scenes just now still played in his mind. That beaten-down fairy, this was the moment she finally died. She was probably the strongest among the bloodthirsty spectators of all generations, purely relying on willpower to persist, just to witness the great heavenly dog's victory. Yet, no one expected the ending to be so dramatic, absurd, and horrifying. In the end, the great heavenly dog was unexpectedly killed by an unknown figure that suddenly emerged. Right before death, she even pleaded to Duan Yun for help, and when she realized there was no salvation, she voluntarily revealed the whereabouts of the divine swords to him. Initially determined to kill the great heavenly dog, Duan Yun actually considered saving her because, at that moment, he felt a kind of empathy, akin to the fox grieving the rabbit's death. Watching such a massive and formidable opponent being effortlessly torn to shreds by the things within, his heart was filled more with anger than fear. An anger to wipe out all those things. After the fierce battle between Duan Yun and the great heavenly dog, the Snow Mountain Palace was no longer as it once was. Or rather, it had always been somewhat dilapidated, and after such a brawl with Duan Yun and the great heavenly dog, it collapsed even further. The previously domineering chair was now buried in remnant snow and bones. The iron throne mentioned by the great heavenly dog was probably that chair. Duan Yun exerted his sword chi and began to dig. The accumulated snow was swiftly stirred away by him, forming a large hole. Soon, the enormous chair was unearthed by him. Ziyu didn't know what just happened. She dared not ask, because even across a long distance, she could feel the terrifying and eerie changes. It was something beyond her imagination. The great heavenly dog's sudden misfortune was more unexpected than the twists in her The Fall of the Goddess Constable True Love ending. Reality was indeed more absurd than idle tales. Staring at the chair that looked like it was studded with bone swords, Duan Yun would rather call it the Bone Throne. For some reason, seeing this enormous seat, seemingly only fitting for someone of the great heavenly dog's stature, he felt the urge to sit on it. And so Duan Yun sat upon it. In the moment when his buttocks touched the surface, he quickly discovered that the chair wasn't as icy and piercing as it appeared, but rather had a sense of softness. In the next moment, an electric-like sensation spread throughout his body, and Duan Yun found himself rising. To be precise, something else of him rose. Goodness, this iron throne actually had such a potent effect of nourishing yin and strengthening yang. Could the reason they called it the Iron Throne be not because it was made of iron, but because it had effects of nourishing yin and strengthening yang, giving one a hardness akin to iron? Hold on, I'm a man, achieving iron hardness is fine, but the great heavenly dog is a woman, where exactly does she achieve iron hardness? For some reason, thinking of this massive woman, who claimed herself as a fairy of a certain number, dying like that, he felt a sense of sorrow. In young hero Duan's dictionary, there was no saying of being both enemies and friends. An enemy was an existence to be eliminated entirely. However, at this moment, his feelings toward the great heavenly dog were very complex. Watching the great heavenly dog being mercilessly killed like that, Duan Yun also felt sorrow and indignity. The one who was supposed to be killed by young hero was snatched away like that, dying so effortlessly. Naturally, his mood was displeased. Thus, he must find a way to enter that place and become stronger, strengthen as much as possible to eliminate those things entirely. What White Jade City or Black Jade City, as long as young hero Duan desires, will become pure and clean heroic land. At this moment, Duan Yun had already stood up, as steady as a pillar. With a turn of his chi force around him, the massive throne was lifted and placed aside by him, causing a rumbling sound. Under the iron throne was indeed a stone lock. Even over a distance of at least a dozen steps, Ziyu felt a sharp coldness around her, making the hair on her body stand up. Even more strangely, the moon-shielding light-shaming sword in her sheath began to sway. Sword? Ziyu questioned in confusion. Once a sword cultivator reaches a certain level, they can resonate with their sword, and the longer the resonance, the more spirit the sword possesses. It is said that when a sword has spirit, it sometimes protects its master on its own. Ziyu's sword hasn't reached the level of a sword spirit, but its current behavior makes it appear as if it wants to protect its master. This only means the moon-shielding light-shaming sword sensed danger, a danger it's particularly sensitive to. This type of danger usually comes from something similar. Given Ziyu's understanding, it should be a very fierce sword emitting a terrifying sword intent, affecting the moon-shielding light-shaming sword. Yes, the great heavenly dog said the divine sword is right below here. Duan Yun said, already gripping the stone lock's clasp, and he lifted it. Immediately, the stone lock cracked with a seam, accompanied by a roaring sound. This lock was heavier than Duan Yun expected, with a weight of at least 1,000 pounds, forcing Duan Yun to increase his strength. His muscles tightened, with true qi flowing inside him, connected through tendons and bones. For a moment, continuous rumbling echoed in the hollow space, and simultaneously, as the tiger-headed stone lock was violently pulled up, a ghostly blue chill emerged from the gap. As a rare sword Dao talent, Duan Yun sensed substantial sword qi here. If an ordinary martial artist were here, the chill alone would be enough to claim their lives. The sword hasn't appeared yet, but merely its sword qi is this astonishing, proving it's truly a divine sword. The veins stood out on Duan Yun's arms, and at this point, the initially light blue chill had turned ghostly blue. In Ziyu's eyes, this ghostly blue resembles Duan Yun's death qi breaking body sword energy, carrying its fearful death-like taste. Ah! Duan Yun increased the force in his hand. With a bang, the stone lock was completely torn apart. With a humming sound, a black shadow leaped up, buzzing incessantly. It was a completely pitch-black long sword, black as night, yet faintly having a star-like luster flowing. This striking divine sword finally revealed its true form at this moment. No, not its true form, because it kept vibrating at a high frequency, making it appear blurred, like it had a layer of mosaic, in the eyes of Duan Yun and Ziyu. This sword is really extraordinary, just its appearance seems full of spirit. Duan Yun leaped up and grasped the sword's body. Yes, the sword's body, not the hilt, because while it vibrates, the entire sword body is blurred, making it unclear which is the hilt. Even with a layer of breaking body sword energy like frost covering Duan Yun's palms, the sharp sensation still penetrated the skin into the flesh. Good sword, Duan Yun praised from the bottom of his heart. Just this unyielding sharpness far surpasses the Huangshan golden sword. The sword seemed dissatisfied in Duan Yun's hand. The more Duan Yun suppressed it with sword qi, the more it struggled. Swish, 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 only hearing a series of piercing wind-breaking sounds. As the sword body vibrated fiercely, several sword shadows broke away from the sword, directly attacking Duan Yun. Duan Yun's expression froze, surrounded by breaking body sword energy. The piercing grinding sounds set in, and those sword shadows suddenly stopped, isolated by the breaking body sword energy. Those were ghostly blue sword qi, substantial-like. At first glance you'd think they weren't sword qi but real swords. These swords clashed with the breaking body sword energy like flying swords. If it was any average warrior, they would have been pierced through by these sword qi and died already. Thus, this sword is fierce. Its ferocity rivals the ferocity found in Yunyu Two States women. But if it's fierce, isn't young hero Duan just as fierce? Duan Yun wouldn't concede, raising his sandy-sized fist, striking fiercely. As the fist was thrown, the air was filled with sounds of tiger roars and dragon chants. With a blasting sound, the fist struck the sword's body. The fiercely ferocious black sword immediately smashed into the ground like a cannonball, creating a big pit while the sword continued to tremble. This trembling wasn't the sword's inherent vibrations, but the result of Duan Yun's fist power. During the duel with Great Heavenly Dog, Duan Yun had already mastered merging various martial arts, thus naturally incorporating wind-flowing force in this punch. With a whimper, the black sword buzzed, releasing ghostly blue sword chi. The sword chi carried ripples, appearing as if spraying water. The black sword urinated, but Duan Yun did not stop. With a flicker of his figure, he swiftly reached the black sword, unleashing a burst of punches and kicks followed by powerful slamming. This black sword might be long and black, but ultimately it's just a sword, forced to endure young heroes' violent punishment. In Ziyu's eyes, Duan Yun was violently thrashing it like beating an unruly brat, relentlessly, unwilling to stop until it's unrecognizable. Briefly, the black sword rolled and flipped on the ground nearly 100 times, releasing hot white smoke. Initially, it tried to retaliate with sword chi, but now it's only worthy of being beaten. Ziyu was certain if it wasn't inherently a divine sword, Duan Yun would have beaten it into molten iron. Indeed, if Duan Yun had executed this series of violent strikes on the Huangshan Golden Sword, the golden sword would have been melted, suitable for crafting golden bracelets and necklaces. A crackling sound erupted, illuminating Duan Yun's face in ghostly blue electric light. Using electricity now? When the brat misbehaves, a little electrotherapy is perfect. The demon electricity whipped onto the sword body like a whip, causing the patterns to blur and distort. With another violent shake of the sword body, a loud sound suddenly echoed, "I want to be a great hero." Yes, the black sword buzzed, producing sounds akin to, "I want to be a great hero." It's due to heroic spirit. Duan Yun infused his unique heroic spirit into the punch and electric current. With a snap, Duan Yun flicked a finger out, causing the black sword to tumble and land on the ground. In Ziyu's perception, like a battered and easy-to-fall woman, violently struck by a thug, pushed once to roll and fall on the ground, appearing so weak and feeble. Weak and feeble was Ziyu's comment on the sword's current state. It emitted white smoke like it was cooked, unmoving upon the ground, like a dead salted fish. If initially its violent trembling resembled a hyperactive brat, now it seemed completely fallen, only gasping weakly. Duan Yun stepped forward, raising his fists again, only to hear a buzzing sound from the black sword, bending what appeared to be its solid sword body. Does this mean it submits? Duan Yun questioned in bewilderment. This posture genuinely resembled submission. Unexpectedly, as soon as he spoke, the sword swayed again, as if nodding. Goodness, was it so wild at first, yet a thorough beating calmed it? Duan Yun reached forward, grasping the black sword once more. This time it didn't struggle at all, appearing truly obedient. In this moment, Ziyu finally saw its true form clearly. It's a black sword, longer than an ordinary blade by 1.5 feet, with a thicker sword body. But saying it's entirely black isn't accurate, for within the darkness, colors flow like deep seawater. Deep seawater, not much different from black, yet adding layers to the sword's color. To describe the sword's impression, colorful black. Seeing this sword obediently held in Duan Yun's hand, Ziyu couldn't help but gaze with envy. A sword cultivator's pursuit is the supreme realm where man and sword become one, and swords possess spirit, though some swords naturally have spirit. The sword in Duan Yun's hand is one born with spirit. What kind of sword is this? Ziyu couldn't help asking. Duan Yun gazed at the sword, reciting, "Unparalleled sword." Unparalleled sword is quite a pretentious name, especially for a sword. Even Ziyu, who writes idle books, might struggle to come up with a name that induces such embarrassment upon hearing. Yet, the sword in Duan Yun's hands is indeed called Unparalleled Sword. The ancient seal script engraved along the sword hilt forms exactly 4 characters, Unparalleled Sword. But this name, when bestowed upon this sword, feels neither pretentious nor discordant, because it truly is an unparalleled sword in every sense. One would be hard-pressed to find a better one. For a moment, Duan Yun thought the Huangshan Golden Sword was really inferior, though he used to think that even in its dilapidated state it could barely be considered a Mrs. Nyo. He couldn't help but question its qualifications as a sword now. If it wasn't for the Huangshan golden sword's significant gold content, which could be exchanged for money, Duan Yun might have thrown it away. Duan Yun lifted the unparalleled sword with a flick, and immediately a sound reminiscent of the ocean dragon's roar rang out. "Isn't there another one?" Duan Yun recalled the Source Palace noble mentioning that there were two divine swords originally fallen from the heavenly court into the human world. The heavenly god used these two divine swords to communicate with the heavens, and she believed both swords were in the hands of the great heavenly dog. However, Duan Yun searched and searched, even finding the great heavenly dog's musings on this sword, confirming that indeed she possessed only this one unparalleled sword. They were buried beneath the throne, a series of bones. These bones were quite long, and the great heavenly dog connected them together to form something resembling a jade scroll. This could be considered the great heavenly dog's diary. Actually, the writings inside were much like what the great heavenly dog had said before, but supplemented with more details about her life. The great heavenly dog was actually quite a pitiful person. She was naturally tall, having already possessed a striking physique that many young girls envied at a very young age. The people of Fusang were peculiar, and many men and women lusted after someone like her. The great heavenly dog's father was born short, and upon witnessing his daughter's tall stature, firmly believed she was not his own. Thus he sold her to a wealthy Fusang man. That man was already too old to engage in such acts, but he enjoyed beating women. He enjoyed whipping women, especially women like the great heavenly dog. One time, the great heavenly dog couldn't stand the beatings anymore. Her body could endure, but she couldn't control the anger flaring in her heart. Indeed, from birth until now, the great heavenly dog felt a fire inside her. That fire seemed alive, influencing her mind. She always behaved obediently, portraying the most well-behaved child in front of her parents, suppressing that fire, but this time, remembering how her father sold her and the continuous abuse she suffered here, she finally couldn't suppress that fire anymore. With just one punch, she beat the wealthy businessman to death. Being a Fusang wealthy merchant and having quite a few perverted hobbies, he naturally had many enemies. Thus he employed numerous skilled warriors as guards. These people were naturally good fighters, some even being prominent figures in the martial world. Upon discovering their patron was slain, they naturally adhered to professional ethics and sought to humiliate the great heavenly dog before killing her. But who would have thought? Just one punch. All it took was one punch. Regardless of whether it was an escort follower or the escort leader, whether weaponless experts in capture techniques or those wielding strange weapons, all were beaten to death by the great heavenly dog's one punch. No one could withstand her second punch. When the great heavenly dog punched fiercely, the victim's body could only break into pieces. That day, the great heavenly dog pushed her innate divine strength to its peak. Even the dog called Fu by the wealthy merchant's household was completely wiped out. It said the dog was a famous breed brought back from high state. The great heavenly dog was very particular about this event, vividly remembering it, thus chronicling it in great detail. She termed this incident awakening. The wealthy merchant had many enemies, but even more friends, many of whom relied on the merchant for survival. Thus it didn't take long before the martial world launched a hunt for the great heavenly dog, resembling the early demon-slaying conference that aimed to kill Duan Yun. The subsequent plot mirrored Duan Yun's experience, or rather, the path to power for the strong is always similar. Many came to kill the great heavenly dog, but she counter-killed them all. And still, all it took was one punch. The only somewhat renowned black warrior took 2 punches before dying at the great heavenly dog's hands, earning the title Stubborn beneath the fist. And because she casually wore a heavenly dog mask at that time, she gained the name One Punch Heavenly Dog. This marked the start of the great heavenly dog's fame, and the subsequent tale was how the great heavenly dog gradually dominated Fusang. Later, the great heavenly dog disappeared, or went low profile, leading to the god Ju and others starting to rule Fusang with arrogance and dominance. Yet she didn't re-emerge to make trouble. Some believed she was no longer capable, not daring to rival someone as strong as God Ju. Others thought she had grown old, indifferent to fame and fortune, while many assumed she practiced wrongly or even became possessed by demons, making it difficult for her to act. But the great heavenly dog's retreat was clearly due to other reasons. That was when she obtained a sword, the very unparalleled sword now in Duan Yun's hand. That day, she suddenly encountered someone, a woman. The woman was extremely petite, and the great heavenly dog felt she could easily crush her with one leg. Bear in mind that she had already been the one-punch heavenly dog for quite a while. Having killed countless masters, her confidence and condition were at unprecedented peaks. Yet upon seeing such a woman, she rarely felt a sense of vigilance, even sensing danger. The woman was quite strange as well. After seeing the great heavenly dog, she begged her to kill her. She said she harbored an unparalleled divine sword within her, capable of reaching the heavens above and the netherworld below. Yet this sword had completely made her body its sheath. It entered and exited daily, making her life worse than death. Yet she couldn't die. She claimed she had lived for 1,003 years, merely appeared a bit old, and begged the great heavenly dog to kill her, because she realized only someone like the great heavenly dog, with innate divine strength and a destined nemesis, could end her life. The great heavenly dog assumed she was mad and did not want to deal with her. But the woman pestered endlessly, even saying, "Are you not afraid?" This sentence was like a needle that pierced the heart of the great heavenly dog, because she truly was a bit afraid. Her body instinctively feared this delicate woman. But because of this sentence, the flame in her heart could no longer be suppressed, so she threw a punch in anger. After punching, she realized just how terrifying this woman was. Or rather, what the woman said might not have been the mad ramblings of a lunatic. In Fusang, where experts abound, those who died only after taking 2 punches from her were highly revered as resilient under punches. But after this punch, not only did the delicate woman not die, she smiled and said, "Try a little harder. I can still take it." The great heavenly dog momentarily felt her fur standing on end. This time she indeed used all her strength. 1 punch, 2 punches, 3 punches. For punches, the great heavenly dog was certain. Within at least 100 punches, the woman was continuously smiling at her. That smile made her both terrified and fueled the fire in her heart to rage. The great heavenly dog did not know how many punches she threw. As she put it, it was more than the thousands of martial artists she had killed at the slaughter dog convention. In the end, the petite woman who kept smiling finally died. From her shattered body, she indeed found a sword called the Unparalleled Sword. This time, the great heavenly dog realized that perhaps there were beings in this world even more formidable than humans, exactly like this woman who begged her to beat her to death. Someone referred to as an immortal. She also realized that humans indeed have limits. To surpass those limits, one must transcend humanity. Afterward, the great heavenly dog, having acquired the sword, did not rush to become an immortal. She continued to relish the glory in the martial arts world. For a long time into the future, she continued to roam triumphantly through Fusang martial world. At that time, she was already at the peak of the martial arts world. This feeling was wonderful, yet its existence was fleeting. Soon, what she felt was endless emptiness and loneliness. High places are indeed lonely. As she said, once a person loses their pursuit, it's like their longest backbone being removed, collapsing altogether. Thus, the great heavenly dog thought of the woman she had killed and remembered that sword. For a long time, she almost forgot about that woman and that sword. Or rather, even if that woman was already dead, she did not wish to face it. Consequently, the great heavenly dog, whose life was as lonely as snow, embarked on the path to becoming an immortal. Utilizing the divine sword and a scroll found within the woman's corpse, she truly found a way, entered the heavenly court, and later, sought to create immortals using the divine soil. The rest of the story, when they previously met the great heavenly dog, she almost told them. In the bone scroll, a detail was written. The heavenly court was empty, devoid of any immortals, and later, as the great heavenly dog gradually acquired an immortal aura, she always felt like something had appeared in the heavenly court, but when she meticulously checked, she found nothing. Duan Yuan strongly suspected that it might have been the thing previously tore apart by the great heavenly dog. By this time, the day was getting dark. Frankly, since entering this palace, Duan Yun and Ziyu had lost the sense of day and night. But now, the sky noticeably darkened. The entire hollow snow mountain palace no longer felt like a sunlit golden mountain, just a dead, desolate ruin. Ziyu couldn't help but shrink her neck, always feeling something bad would emerge after dark here. Duan Yun was also somewhat tired today. Since the divine sword was in hand, he didn't want to stay in this eerie place any longer. In the past, when faced with seemingly invincible opponents, he would often charge ahead impulsively because he believed in his extraordinary wisdom and supreme talent. But this time, faced with those inexplicable things, he planned to be a bit more cautious. Because he felt his extraordinary wisdom hadn't fully expanded. A small expansion was not an expansion. Confronting something that could easily tear apart the great heavenly dog was still not enough. If his extraordinary wisdom could fully open, he would probably have already charged in and killed those beings entirely. In conclusion, he blamed it all on his inadequate extraordinary wisdom, deciding to go back first to hone it further, then rely on this divine sword and his supreme talent, gambling with all his effort to add. Duan Yun and Ziyu started to leave. As they walked from the Snow Mountain Palace to the hall full of hooks, then to that exquisite Source Palace, it felt almost like a world apart. Or rather, like walking from one world back to the original world. Because everything they experienced that day seemed so tie-in. By now, the snow-white Source Palace was no longer as pure and flawless as before. The battle between Duan Yun and the great heavenly dog had also impacted this area. The accumulated snow and broken bones from the snow mountain had scattered here, damaging many items and laying a layer of ashes on the ground. Yet that feeling of deathly stillness and coldness remained. This was still the palace where one dared not speak loudly, fearing to disturb the heavenly people. Duan Yun, holding the unparalleled sword, quietly noted down some epithets in his little notebook. If they truly were heavenly people, next time he would annihilate them all. Because they offended him, his prey was intercepted by them, and intercepted so effortlessly as if tearing away just a leaf. They tore the great heavenly dog's body. But it was young hero Duan's pride they damaged. The negative emotions brought to this young hero today, he remembered. In the future, he would surely exact vengeance on their whole family. Upon leaving Source Palace, the originally beautiful mirror Lake Cherry Blossoms also changed. The water surface remained mirror-like, though many snow remnants floated on it, and many cherry blossom trees had deteriorated. At this moment, Duan Yun couldn't help but recount everything he saw in that crevice. Upon hearing Duan Yun's description, Ziyu still felt it was hard to believe, often thinking it was just Duan Yun's illusion. But considering the great heavenly dog's fate, the description did not seem false. The great heavenly dog was effortlessly torn apart by what lay beyond that crevice. Duan Yun said, "Before that crevice closed, I vaguely saw the words, Jade City on a plaque." Ziyu asked in confusion, "Jade City? White Jade City?" Duan Yun suddenly felt more spirited, saying, "You know of the White Jade City?" Ziyu nodded and said, "White Jade City has always been a Taoist saying. Taoism speaks of a palace called White Jade City, in the heavens, where those who have attained the way reside. Most of these immortals are their ancestors. This saying is not particularly uncommon, a bit like Taoism trying to connect in-laws. The higher the ancestor, the better, the more immortal, the better. This is not much different from a woman at the Red House claiming to be a fairy descended to mortal realm. But after experiencing all this, Duan Yun actually felt this saying resonated with him. Because many Taoists in the martial world are determined to ascend to the heavens. They believe only by ascending can they truly seek their own way. And within the martial world, the Taoists in that heavenly people city make no pretense of it. At this point, Ziyu said, "Have you ever heard of the true master of the Netherworld Mountain Villa?" "The true master?" There's a rumor. They believe only by ascending can they truly seek their own way. And within the martial world, the Taoists in that heavenly people city make no pretense of it. At this point, Ziyu said, "Have you ever heard of the true master of the Netherworld Mountain Villa? The true master? There's a rumor. Duan Yun and the Murong brothers once destroyed a branch of the Netherworld Mountain Villa, and could be said to have a deep grudge against the villa, leaving a profound impression of this assassin organization. Because the branch manor master could almost be called a corpse king. But the true owner of Netherworld Mountain Villa and the story of White Jade City, this was his first time hearing about. In fact, this theory had circulated in the martial world before, but there were always rumors in the martial world with more falsehoods than truths. Just like in Duan Yun's rumors, there was even one that said he drugged a sow, allowing the manor master's wife to be ridden by the sow, which was quite absurd. So, such news was at most passed around as a bit of martial world gossip, and as Duan Yun was busy striving to become a great hero, he had no time to listen to these rumors. Ziyu knew about this saying because she was someone who wrote books and had a habit of collecting world anecdotes. Originally, it was just one among many unimpressive rumors in the martial world, as it sounded quite fictional. But now that it's connected with the encounters of Duan Yun, and it seemed to have a bit of truth. The strange noises coming from the building, the immortal mist swirling, the owner of Netherworld Mountain Villa hadn't come down the building for years, and no one had gone up there either, all of which resembled the situation of the great heavenly dog. Coincidentally, that building was also called White Jade City. Whether the owner of Netherworld Mountain Villa had entered the real White Jade City or not was still undetermined, but he should have a great connection with White Jade City. Maybe he, like the great heavenly dog, had found the path to becoming an immortal, and was in the process of becoming one. It's said that Netherworld Mountain Villa is known for their vengeance, and yet after he and the Murong brothers destroyed one of their branches, no action was taken, which must also be related to the villa's owner. There's even a saying that the manor master in the White Jade City building is already dead, because it's now completely isolated by mist, and no one can enter that building. At this moment, Duan Yun and Ziyu had arrived above the valley. From here, they could see the enormous outline of the palace in the valley. It resembled a colossal, undead corpse, giving off an enormous sense of horror in the night. Duan Yun knew he would return here, because there's something inside he hasn't killed yet. At the same time, Duan Yun felt that this world was indeed deeper than imagined. This truly wasn't just a simple martial arts world. Up to now, he had encountered zombies, monsters, immortals, as well as the traces of extraterrestrials and the inexplicable things in White Jade City. The heavenly god has fallen. The source god is dead. In the year of Jiazi, the hero shall rise. Duan Yun had been on the island for less than a month, and already 2 martial arts giants had died on Fusang. If the Fusang martial world was supported by such giants, then it could be said that half the sky of the Fusang martial world had collapsed. But young hero Duan still did not stop. He said he would slaughter his way through the Fusang martial world, so he would slaughter his way through the Fusang martial world. He now intended to use a circuitous strategy to deal with the things in White Jade City. But can't he handle you on this bird island? Ah! Yame butterfly. Why aren't you following the script? A woman, covered in blood, clung to Duan Yun's leg and struggled. She, an extremely beautiful married woman, had long been in the top 5 on Fusang's famous instruments list. Countless men wanted to defeat her husband and say to her, "Madam, you don't want your husband to." When life got a bit dull, she even looked forward to such things happening. Today, what she had longed for truly came. Her mighty and heroic husband had been knocked to the ground by the handsome and suave young man before her. Just as she was facing the panic-stricken yet charming herself, the next moment, she found that she too had been beaten. She was beaten even more severely than her husband, with countless bones broken, and unable to even attempt any seductive struggles. Duan Yun looked at her face, raised his hand, and smashed a punch down, flattening the face she thought was charming. This martial hall may seem like your husband is in charge, but this young hero had long found out that you're actually the main one, with all the trafficking of children and women being your work. Taste this young hero's righteous iron fist. With a booming sound, Duanyun's punch landed on her head, and the spine was smashed through, leaving her entire body limp like a puddle of mud on the ground. And as for her defeated husband, he could only watch as this happened. This scenario was not what he imagined either. He thought his wife would be, but now she was gone. Beaten to death? By all accounts, it was a good thing that his wife died without much disgrace. But why did he feel a bit disappointed? Before she died, the wife still clung to Duanyun's leg, using all her strength to cough up blood and say, "You outsider, you're really too unruly." With that, she died. Because of Duanyun's merciless iron fist, the routine expected by the Fusang people truly did not appear at all. Only killing. This was the 12th Fusang sect Duanyun had destroyed after leaving the Source Valley. Even though he missed Yuzhu Manor very much, missed home, but as young hero Duan said he would slaughter his way through the Fusang martial world, he would do it, even if it meant bearing the pain of missing his hometown. He was willing. Duanyun shook his legs twice to fling the woman's corpse away, unable to help but grumble, "Why are you holding on so tight?" By this time, the Qinghe Martial Pavilion was already silent. Because all 400 people in the Martial Pavilion, along with 28 Akita dogs, were all wiped out clean by young hero Duan. Even the fish in the pond were blasted cooked with a single palm strike. Duanyun drew his right hand, and the blood from the woman's head flew into his palm. Afterward, he wrote on the wall with blood, "The killer is Duanyun, young hero Duan." And Ziyu followed beneath his blood writing the equivalent in the Fusang language. Then it began to rain. It was as if even the Lord of Heaven felt Duanyun's murderous intent, and rain started pouring to wash the earth after his killing. Duanyun stood in the rain, with the raindrops bouncing off him, seemingly afraid of his presence. Lately, he annihilated 12 sects in one breath, not only to fulfill his promise to challenge the Fusang martial world, but also because he wanted to test the sword. Test the unparalleled sword. Upon getting such a sword, naturally, one must give it a trial run, indulging in the thrill. Unfortunately, the Fusang martial world is somewhat underwhelming. At least the 12 sects he encountered were subpar. Only one martial artist made him draw half a sword. The sword was drawn halfway, yet the opponent was already split in two. This was already the strongest expert he had encountered. It is evident that figures like Gaju and the Great Heavenly Dog are rare and hard to come by. For a moment, Duanyun felt as lonely as snow. This heavy rain fell, but the streets did not become clean because the roads here were originally muddy paths full of pits and hollows, with the rain making them even worse. Duanyun had just annihilated the Qinghe Martial Pavilion, which could be said to be the actual ruling force of this city. The pavilion itself boasted exquisite architecture, with much of the floor paved with white jade. Yet the city they ruled was extremely poor. Many men and women barely had clothes to cover themselves, appearing very thin. Duanyun personally saw an old lady eating a green pepper, meticulously slicing it into thin strips, placing them on 2 plates, and then closing her eyes to pray. Every bite of green pepper was accompanied by the words, "Delicious." Ziyu translated, saying it meant, "delicious." The old lady made a single green pepper feel like a national banquet. Ziyu explained that this was the local customs of Fusang, known as ritual sense, meaning even when eating dung, it is made with decorative flowers and placed on a plate, with a demeanor of craftsmanship. At this time, every household's doors were closed tightly, for they had received the news that Qinghe Martial Pavilion had been slaughtered. Even though many in the city benefited from Qinghe Martial Pavilion's tyranny, at this moment they were all subdued. Some had already fled, because they feared being implicated. It can only be said that this external deity does not adhere to martial world rules, making all of Fusang tremble with fear. Indeed, within just a month, Duanyun, the old demon from Jouzhou, had become a household name in Fusang. Even though he went to Source Valley where the Great Heavenly Dog died, and the news hadn't spread yet, just the feat of killing Gaju was enough to leave people utterly shocked. Who would have thought that after killing Gaju and many from the Ju family, this old demon disappeared for a while? People thought he had left, but he suddenly reappeared, engaging in a brutal killing spree. Though Fusong is small, there are already more than 100 legends about Duan Yun. Reincarnated demon star, Fusong disaster, 3 heads and 6 arms. Even rumors that each toe could perform the 3-sword style abound. While many people were frightened, they also started tracing the origins, wanting to know why this calamity suddenly came to Fusong. Upon learning that it was because the Zhu family provoked him in high state, many people began to harshly denounce the Zhu family members. You idiot! Why did you provoke him? Isn't Fusong enough for your Zhu family to show off? Stand up and take responsibility. If the Zhu family were at their peak, absolutely no one would dare say such words, but now that the backbone of the Zhu family, God Zhu, is dead, along with most of the elite, they naturally became everyone's target. Facing this immense pressure of condemnation, some members of the Zhu family indeed came out to apologize, bowing 81 times, crying uncontrollably. But none of this stopped Duan Yun's rampage. Even more painful was the fact that the Fusong martial world, claiming to be several floors above the Jiuzhou martial arts, faced such rampant killing by an outsider. Yet no expert dared stand up against him. It can be said that currently, Duan Yun's status in Fusong is far above that of any Lord He. To know that a few days ago at least 100 people came to offer their daughters and wives, only to have them and their families killed instead. Trying to test young hero Duan in this way is to underestimate young hero Duan's sense of justice and will. At this point, Fusong people are completely out of options. In the city, every household's doors were tightly closed, leaving a group of people feeling like livestock trapped in a cage, waiting to be slaughtered. Many couldn't help but question, why did you provoke him? Just as Duan Yun and Ziyu were splashing through the rain, planning to leave for the next place, suddenly a dozen people appeared at the city gate. These dozen people knelt in a row very neatly. Someone is actually blocking the way? For a moment, Duan Yun couldn't help but admire these people. After all, he had killed so many, there were hardly any who dared kneel before him. It seems these little Fusong folks still have a bit of courage. The man in front spoke, and it was a standard Jiuzhou accent. Mr. Duan, young hero Duan, please stop the killing. The lords of Hai are innocent. It's all our fault for sowing discord, causing misunderstanding between you and the lords of Hai. Really, please stop the killing. For a moment, the cries and howls blended into one, feeling even more unbearable than if their own parents had just died. These people were naturally all the Lord Hai's followers. Saying it was more painful than the death of one's parents was an underestimation of their grief. Every time Duan Yun killed someone, every time he wiped out a faction, their hearts bled. Because those killed were their revered Lord Hai. Many Fusong people discovered that the reason Duan Yun landed on the island was due to these followers' instigations. Thus, many followers were beaten to death by Fusong people on the way. The lucky surviving followers held no grudge against the Fusong people. Instead, they immediately looked inward, coming to ask Duan Yun to stop the slaughter. Because although the Lord Hai was killed, their hearts bore the pain. To prevent the continued innocent slaughter of their Lord's Hai, they were willing to do anything. So at this moment, although this group hated Duan Yun to the core, cursed him hundreds and thousands of times in their hearts, wishing for him to die hundreds of horrifying deaths, they nonetheless swallowed their pride and came humbly to plead rationally. Young hero Duan, no more killing. Any more and it will incite a blood feud between Jiuzhou and Fusong. If a real fight breaks out, you might not be able to bear the responsibility. Yes, enough have died. The Hai State and Fusong people hold no grudges. Why not let it go and give Jiuzhou martial arts some dignity? Hearing this, Duan Yun couldn't help but chuckle. Dignity? Does this young hero lack dignity? Wasn't it you who said this bunch of swine and dogs were strong? Are you laughing when this young hero has cut through the Fusong martial world? So, tell me, is the Fusong martial world penetrated or not? Yes, it's penetrated. It's really penetrated. Young hero Duan, please stop. We beg you. Duan Yun shook his head and said, for me, it hasn't nearly been penetrated enough. It would take at least 10 or 100 times more to count as a minor penetration. Didn't some of you say you wanted to be born as Fusang people in your next life? For me, by the time you're born in your next life, Fusang won't even exist, and only then maybe it's penetrated. Hearing this, the faces of these followers turned pale. Mr. Duan, young hero Duan, are you joking? Duan Yun replied, joking at this moment? This statement made the group utterly panic. The one in front shouted with a hoarse voice, if you're going to kill Fusang people, kill me first. Step over my dead body. Duan Yun shook his head and said, I'm not going to kill you. I want you to watch carefully how I penetrate through these Fusang people. No, don't. Duan Yun no longer paid attention to them, walking straight ahead. Behind him, someone threatened, Old Demon Duan, do you believe I'll commit suicide to show you? You will incur divine retribution. You will die. These people, with tears in their eyes, were a true portrayal of blood and tears. Rumble. The thunder roared loudly. Lightning struck amid the pouring rain. Suddenly, lightning and thunder struck where Duan Yun stood, catching the followers' attention. Divine retribution. Old Demon Duan deserves to be struck dead by divine retribution for killing the Lord's High. But after the lightning, Duan Yun still stood the same place, even burping, exclaiming, this thunder tastes quite pure. In the next moment, more lightning fell. At this time, Duan Yun's extraordinary wisdom flashed, and his unparalleled sword was already unsheathed. Mighty divine lightning, descend by the sword. I summon the magnificent heavenly power. The followers widened their eyes, only to see Duan Yun bathed in the thunder, reciting loudly, surrounded by sword light. Hey, isn't this supposed to be divine punishment? Heavenly thunder? How come you seem tamed, even more obedient than his son? At this moment, Duan Yun was already crafting his own swordsmanship, commanding the heavenly thunder. Old Demon Duan, may you die a miserable death. Watching this scene, two followers couldn't endure the psychological blow and died from sheer rage. The storm raged, with thunder rumbling. All the nearby heavenly thunder converged on Duan Yun's location. It wasn't that he had truly lost his mind, cursed by those sea dogs and now under divine punishment. He was attracting it intentionally. When he encountered those skin kites in Snowtown, that was the first time Duan Yun experienced the technique of lightning attraction. It was a skill from the Thunder God and Mother sect, which wasn't all that effective. Afterward, he charged himself several times, gradually developing his own insights on attracting lightning. To attract lightning, it's not enough to just fly into the sky or find an open area. The key is to actively draw it in. On his last charge, Duan Yun discovered that the demon electricity in his body rotated to create a magnetic field, attracting lightning. At this moment, the speed of demon electricity spinning inside Duan Yun kept accelerating. The heavenly thunder of the thunderstorm was irresistibly drawn to him, rushing into his body. When Duan Yun charged up before, he had tried attracting lightning like this, but never with such intensity. If his earlier approach to attracting lightning was like a woman coyly showing off in a sheer gauze dress, today was akin to being naked, flaunting every bit of charm. The heavenly thunder, unable to resist temptation, rushed toward the great vortex formed by the spinning demon electricity within him. Charging with such intensity, Duan Yun was quickly filled up. He knew he couldn't take any more. One more charge would overflow. Yet, the heavenly thunder continued crashing into him as if for free, leaving the electrified Duan Yun dazed as his extraordinary wisdom sparkled madly. Suddenly, he comprehended a sword technique that descended from the heavens.
Thunder. Come.
9 heavens mystical shall transform into divine thunder. The majestic power of the heavens, drawn by the sword, thunderbolt wrath. With hands outstretched, Duan Yun floated in the air, pointing the unparalleled sword in his right hand skyward. The next moment, lightning swirled around him, creating a grand formation. As the formation spun, dust and stones flew, and all the surrounding vegetation was burned to ashes. With a rumble, the formation changed again, the powerful heavenly thunder now completely taking the form of a divine sword. They circled Duan Yun, illuminating him as if it were daylight. Whether sea dogs or Ziyu, at that moment, they felt they were witnessing the descent of an immortal. Damn! Is old demon Duan really going to ascend to immortality? No. No. Don't let Lord Hai get hurt again. D. In their eyes, even if old demon Duan were to become immortal, he would have to endure this heavenly tribulation. Considering the innumerable crimes of old demon Duan, heaven would never show mercy and would want to punish him. Otherwise, it would mean that the great Lord Hai lived a short life while villains thrived for 1,000 years. Yes, in their hearts, old demon Duan was truly wicked. They had never seen anyone as bad as him. And at that moment, Duan Yun somewhat shared their understanding. He felt the lightning around him and thought perhaps the legendary immortals who ascended after enduring a heavenly tribulation might be like him. He even speculated that the so-called immortals who ascended after a heavenly tribulation were actually those who had mastered the demon electricity magnetic field. When one had mastered the demon electricity magnetic field to a certain level, it would naturally attract 9 heavens' thunder, making it appear as if they were an immortal enduring a tribulation. Duan Yun couldn't help but wonder if he continued to develop the demon electricity magnetic field, he might also electrotherapize his way to immortality. Seeing the scenes before them, the sea dog's once hopeful eyes grew increasingly dim. For Duan Yun was becoming more adept at manipulating lightning. The lightning surrounding him, far from attacking, seemed to become his protector, spinning around him. Snap! At this moment, Duan Yun snapped his fingers. The 12 enormous thunder swords around him boomed loudly, crashing to the ground. In an instant, 12 massive craters appeared on the ground, filled with thunderfire, resembling a pool of thunder. With a rumble, the thunderfire spread, setting the surrounding hills ablaze. Duan Yun descended in a flash of electricity, feeling the power surge through him, and said to Ziyu with an electrifying gaze, "I've thought of a new title for myself." "What title?" "Thunderbolt Wrath Lei Jun, the young hero." Thus, young hero Duan gained a new alias. Seeing Duan Yun's electrified form, Ziyu found herself momentarily unable to retort. For this person was indeed very thunderous, indeed June-like, indeed Thunderbolt Lei Jun. The young hero is compassionate, yet thunderfire is merciless. The hills burned, and the flames rapidly spread, turning the sky a deep red. Duan Yun and Ziyu paid no mind, letting the thunderfire scorch the mountains. In Jiuzhou, when they encountered wildfires, they worked hard to extinguish them. But here, to young hero Duan, there were too many demons and ghosts, and a cleansing by thunderfire posed no problem. "Help! Put out the fire!" A sea dog cried out desperately. "If we don't put out the fire, the Holy Land will be burned." To them, every inch of Fusang land was sacred, even the rough, pitted roads, for it was beautiful in their hearts. And the towns of Fusang held an even more special place. Walking into them, breathing the same air as Lord Hai felt like a form of baptism. But now, the fire surged, threatening to engulf this sacred town. 3 sea dogs charged forward resolutely, trying to extinguish the flames, but were quickly consumed by the fire. The Fusang people, witnessing the blaze, began to flee, with some mocking the sea dogs charging into the fire. "What fools!" Sakura Village is a city of samurai. Sakura can be found everywhere in Fusang, but only here is it called Sakura Village. In fact, Sakura Village was originally unremarkable until 200 years ago when the Fusang swordmaster retired here, praised the cherry blossoms for reminding him of his first love and hometown, and thus Sakura Village became famous in Fusang. Later on, more and more samurai chose to retire here, and with the emergence of many experts, the city grew increasingly prosperous. Ultimately, the limitations of a place are determined by its inhabitants. It's said that at Sakura Village's peak, the one selling vegetables at the village entrance was the god of Tachi, the one selling handmade beef balls at the back was the king of strength, and the one who used to slaughter pigs in the village was the god of killing. What seemed like ordinary squabbles could escalate into duels between top experts. Primarily, Both parties believed they were a wolf in sheep's clothing, confident in defeating the opponent, only to realize their opponent's prowess once they made their move. Because of this, the experts who lived here increasingly felt the pressure to compete, diminishing the enjoyment of feigning weakness, prompting some to move away. But this is indeed a city of samurai, the retreat of the previous generation of Fusang swordmaster. So Sakura Village still holds a high status in the Fusang martial world, at least several floors high. Due to the abundance of martial artists, the activities here are rather extreme. Things like killing someone for no reason, selling someone, dealing drugs, sleeping with someone else's wife, searching for martial arts manuals in the black market, and occasionally joining a sect, acknowledging a godfather, and then betraying the sect and stabbing the godfather are all commonplace. Thus, it also has another name, Village of Sin. Ordinary people simply can't survive here. Or rather, there aren't any ordinary folks here at all. Because the original locals either escaped or were killed, and the newcomers are all outsiders. As martial artists, those not doing well like to band together, while those who succeed naturally have many underlings. Yes, there are only warriors and others here. Those who aren't warriors are no different from livestock. But once those perceived as livestock have the chance to learn martial arts, they would then harshly oppress and torture their former peers. Somewhat like a wife who becomes a mother-in-law and treats her daughter-in-law harshly. This day, the tea house in Sakura Village is still bustling with people. In truth, the so-called hidden masters aren't suited to be too secluded. The reason so many masters choose to retire in Sakura Village is that it's prosperous enough and treats the weak more like livestock. Here, you can immediately indulge in food, drink, prostitution, and gambling, and if you crave something, you can have the weak deliver it. Not only do they not receive any reward, but if they're late, they'll be punished. Even if a brothel girl is called to serve and she's late, she'll also face consequences. For ordinary people, this is simply inhumane. Calling them consumables isn't an exaggeration, yet people still flock here. For no other reason than everyone here seeks an opportunity to rise to fame. With numerous masters in Sakura Village, even being a dog here amplifies your chances to learn martial arts compared to outside. Within Sakura Village, tea houses are lively places because even reclusive masters enjoy listening to the hustle and bustle, especially when it involves themselves. For instance, even if a master has gone into seclusion, they can still occasionally hear rumors about themselves bringing a cheerful feeling inside. Some masters, having been hidden away for too long, notice their fame dwindling and then step out to perform a few major feats to boost their reputation. Days later, upon hearing their name in tea houses again, they feel instantly gratified. At this moment, the tea house in Sakura Village is naturally abuzz with conversations about the martial world. And recently, the biggest story in the martial world is the arrival of old demon Duan from Jojo. This person is impervious to influence, kills whoever he wishes, burns mountains at a whim, and no one seems able to stop him. After all, the person who previously attempted to stop him was Gaju, a pillar of Fusang martial world, and even this pillar was toppled, so who can stand against him? Can they withstand him? The first thought that comes to mind is Master Sword Saint from Sakura Village, but unfortunately, when Master Sword Saint chose to retire, he was already an old man. Now, 200 years have passed. Even if his martial arts level was miraculous, he's likely dead, with no known successor. The group in the tea house grows increasingly animated. After all, most here are martial artists, so this tea house isn't lacking in many experts. Mentioning the malevolent deeds of old demon from Jojo, the group becomes enraged. Only picking soft targets. Let's see him try here with us. Exactly, he's targeting some nobodies and burning wild mountains. Does he dare to try in our Sakura Village? At this point, the Fusang people present all puffed out their proud chests. Fusang's Sakura Village, after all, is akin to the Evil People Valley in Jojo and Heavenly People City. With a gathering of experts, it can be considered a forbidden area of martial arts. No matter how grandmaster or top expert one is, unfamiliarity here can lead to accidents. After all, even a fierce tiger fears a pack of wolves. If a bunch of experts are sizing you up, it's enough to make you sweat. This is why the group in the tea house is so indignant and fearless. If they go out looking for trouble with old Demon Duan from Jojo, they might mess up. But if old Demon Duan dares to come to Sakura Village, he's practically walking into his death. Just then, a young man suddenly leapt up in the tea house. He jumped onto a beam, looking down at the crowd. "You rabble. I've given you too much face." The young man, handsome and full of presence, spoke flawless Jojo dialect. But the people here quickly understood him because almost simultaneously, a pleasant female voice was synchronously translating. "The young hero is here, who wants to try me?" The people below had just processed that this suddenly appearing handsome man might be the old Demon Duan. Before they could cry out for a righteous gang assault to slay the demon, they heard a loud, "Thunder, come." Duan Yun's voice was like thunder, and as it resounded, a swirling vortex formed at his chest, with flashes of lightning jumping within the vortex. His voice was loud, spreading far, as if it was meant to float to the heavens. Soon after, the heavens truly responded to him. Rumble. A massive thunderclap sounded as the previously sparsely clouded sky erupted with rolling thunder. Boom! In the next moment, the tea house's roof tiles were shattered into fragments. Along with them, the rooftops within a mile radius were also reduced to fragments. Because the lightning had arrived, the thunder from the heavens, attracted by the magnetic field generated by Duan Yun, landed around them in the blink of an eye. The unlucky ones were electrocuted in an instant, their bodies igniting from the inside out, turning to ash. Those with better luck who weren't struck down immediately wouldn't enjoy their luck for long either. Because Duan Yun's heavenly thunder magnitude had already been activated. 9 heavens mystic transform into divine thunder. Tremendous heavenly power. Lead it with a sword. As his voice rose, he was bathed in lightning, as if he were a heavenly god. All around him the lightning revolved. Where the lightning passed, cries of anguish echoed in unison. In a short span of time, the core area of Sakura Village was enveloped by thunderfire. The man who first made the challenge for Duan Yun to try was a man. He was a ninja with an exceptionally agile movement technique, yet under the frenzied thunderstorm, he was paralyzed from the waist down in an instant. He looked at Duan Yun amidst the storm, and couldn't help but wail, "Brother, are you serious? I was just kidding." However, at this moment, Duan Yun didn't care about any excuses. Today, he was determined to raise the city. Even if you drank chrysanthemum tea instead of jasmine tea today to the young hero Duan, it was still a capital offense. Because the young hero had realized this was a city of sin, a place more depraved and indulgent than any past Wangchun city. In Jojo, the young hero Duan still had the patience to transform and rebuild the heroic land, but in this ridiculous Fusang, he had no such patience. Kill, kill, kill. Heavenly thunder magnitude. With an angry roar, the thunder transformed into countless massive electric swords, roaring as they spun. Rumble. The myriad thunders that surrounded him began to sweep outward. Where the thunder passed, everything was obliterated. Some martial artists attempted to use movement techniques, only to be turned to charcoal midair. In less than half a cup of tea's time, half of Sakura Village was already laid to waste. Of course, there were still some who broke through the siege. For example, 2 men and a woman whose movement techniques were as quick as lightning. When the thunder fell, they were able to withstand it to some extent. Because they were martial arts grandmasters hidden in this place. They were the pinnacle of existence in this warrior city, even within the Fusang martial world. They knew they were no match for this Jojo old demon who could control lightning, but escaping with their lives was still possible. Just then, a thunderous voice roared, "Humph! Trying to run?" And an overwhelming sense of pressure surged toward them. The 2 men and the woman looked up, only to see Duan Yun had somehow risen into the sky. Countless giant electric swords were converging towards his hand. The electric swords crowded together, their color deepening, resembling flowing dark blue sea water. D. With this sword, which gathered the vast majority of heavenly thunder, smashing down, the entire world seemed to change color. A thunderous sword descended, and the core area of Sakura Village was already cooked. The air was thick with the scent of barbecue, and a mushroom cloud billowed up, lingering without dissipating. If Duan Yun's 10-layered spring rain earlier had the ability to bring suffering to a city's inhabitants, then at this moment, this sword possessed the capability to turn a city's populace into a barbecue. One can only say this trip was not in vain. He not only obtained the unparalleled divine sword but also gained a more destructive technique. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel grateful to those who boast about the Fusang martial world. Without them, he wouldn't have thought to venture into the Fusang martial world and naturally wouldn't have obtained the divine sword or comprehended such techniques. If this technique has a weakness, it's that it requires drawing the thunder. The scale of thunder during rainy, cloudy, or clear days is completely different. Today's thunder condition is quite good. Though it looks cloudy, actually there are many thunder clouds above. Duan Yun merely drew them down in advance. Watching Duan Yun burn down a city with one sword strike, Ziyu couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. She could feel that Duan Yun's methods had become rougher since coming to Fusang, almost as if he didn't regard the people here as human. But thinking about it, one can understand because the people here have never regarded Jojo people as humans, especially those in the martial world who consider those from Jojo as subhumans. Duan Yun was merely returning the validation. The Fusang people have been tyrannical for so many years. Surely, they can withstand a bit of intensity, can't they? Ha! At this moment, Duan Yun suddenly stepped on his left foot with his right foot to rise into the air. After executing the 10,000 swords of Lei Jun, his body was indeed quite exhausted, feeling as if he had continuously strained himself 7 times. Yet at this moment the thing below captured his attention. Ever since that mushroom cloud ascended, the air, beyond the pervasive barbecue scent, possessed an elusive presence. These things were as tiny as dust, but Duan Yun could distinctly sense them, because they had a temperature, warming the heart, stimulating his skin and flesh. Even the ominous red hair started to stir. What exactly is this? Duan Yun closed his eyes to carefully feel it, discovering these things were like invisible threads. These threads were scattered, leading Duan Yun to wonder aloud, could this be radiation lines? He couldn't help but open his pores to absorb a wave of these lines, feeling the change in his body. Indeed, it is radiation. No one told me that the power of thunder and lightning absorbed and operated by the demon electricity magnetic field could generate radiation. This feels like nuclear radiation. If it were in his past life, upon hearing about nuclear radiation, Duan Yun would surely stay far away. But now he was wildly absorbing these rays. Because after these radiations encountered the ominous red hair, they could produce a strange energy. In Duan Yun's perception, this energy would condense on the red hair, crystallizing. Suddenly, Ziyu exclaimed in surprise, "Why are you growing feathers? Are you turning into a birdman? Growing feathers?" Duan Yun suddenly opened his eyes, puzzled. There's only a one-character difference between growing hair and growing feathers. But the difference is significant. Duan Yun had grown ominous red hair more than once or twice, and Ziyu, being an old acquaintance, could definitely surprise her with a new change. Looking at the feathers on his arm, Duan Yun couldn't help but exclaim, "Damn!" The previous red hair was thin like needles, similar to the form of breaking body sword energy, but now it had condensed into clusters of feathers. Indeed, they resembled crane feathers in shape, but were red, filled with an ominous aura. This aura clearly induces fear, yet at this moment, Ziyu's eyes were entranced. Due to this moment, with Duan Yun's bare arm adorned with crimson crane feathers, there was an extraordinarily unique attraction. In short, it's that kind of unique, irresistible allure. Shining, Fenglinger, I too want him. Yes, previously, Ziyu and Duan Yun's relationship was just mutual admiration. Slightly more than kindred spirits after digging that canal, yet not reaching a romantic level. Ziyu hadn't planned on progressing further, as her life wasn't solely about pursuing a man. After all, writing was the career she pursued all her life. But at this moment, She realized she had a tiny bit of affection for Duan Yun, a tiny bit of desire to wholly possess him. Thus Ziyu decided she wanted to ascend step by step to the top, becoming the foremost female knight of Yuzhou, matching him as the leading young hero of Yuzhou. She wanted to write the story that belonged to her and him, pioneering the heroic land with him, building countless water projects for him, having many... Ahem! Ziyu quickly halted her thoughts, as she realized that probably due to her fiery ideas, her sister Qingyu had awakened. What were you just thinking? Having children with him? Qingyu's voice emerged from the retort. Duan Yun had already turned his gaze this way. Ziyu quickly restrained herself. Shut up! My foolish sister, you've finally come to the springtime. Qingyu mocked. Ziyu blushed. I told you to shut up. What if I don't shut up? You dare to think but not admit? So low. You're the one who's low. Believe it or not. I'll beat you. Beat me? Who's afraid of whom? Only to see Ziyu pinch her right shoulder, causing Qingyu to let out a muffled grunt. Soon after, Qingyu pinched her left waist, and Ziyu let out a muffled grunt.